Hey, warmer from the low. Welcome to lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. We've got an excellent podcast for you guys. Joining me in segment number 2, we're going to have aboard Curtis Rogers. He does such good work over at 710 Seattle Sports. Saw a lot of Big Sky action yesterday. We have a lot going on the West Coast landscape in general, so we're going to be chatting with him about that. We're going to get a little bit of a primer for a lot of those mid-major conference tournaments out west. We're going to be taking a look at the Pac-12. We're going to be taking a look at those two dominant teams in the WCC in Gonzaga and St. Mary's as well. And we're going to get his thoughts on a few teams that are ascending and declining in college basketball as well. In the final segment, going to get you guys picks and analysis on every game on the betting board for this college basketball Tuesday as we hit some bank shots. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, do have one of two ways we offer those in. First one is by Twitter/X timeline at Jaden_D1. Keep in mind, letters M, they mean does not matter. So as per usual, please send these into the timeline. Other ways, find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. And from there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. Did not get in any of those Twitter/X questions today, but had a great day of basketball on Monday. Let's take a look back at it, try to find some trends, and try to get to know these teams a little bit better.
Games from yesterday is Greg buzzing about. Here is the rowdy recap.
Absolutely have to lead it off with this. Texas was leading by double figures for about, I would say, the first 31, 32 minutes of this game against Baylor, and then it all went awry. As a matter of fact, for Texas, they're up 11 points with a little bit north of 13 minutes remaining, and they lose 93-85, and they do not cover the closing 7.5. That drops them to 11-19 against the spread this season. As for Baylor, they went 9 of 13 from three-point range. Jalen Bridges was on absolute fuego, 32 points, 9 rebounds. Baylor actually lose the turnover battle by a count of 13-5, but they absolutely lambasted Texas on the glass. 36-21. Dylan Dessou was playing through illness, only made it through 10 minutes. He had 3 points, 3 assists, was a non-factor. That was big. As Max Asmus, he did go off for 33 points. He did everything that he could, but just on a lot of support around him, and with Dessou being out with the flu, that really did cause for some issues there. You did see Duke be able to get the job done, and they have now covered, by the way, 6 out of their last 7 games. Duke really starting to be able to make you some money. They take down NC State, this by kind of 79-64 as for NC State. They went just 3 of 9 from 3. Duke was 9 of 30 from distance, but this Duke team has really been putting the clamps down on defense. You take a look at what Duke has been able to do recently, and now they have given up 69 points or fewer in all but one of their games ever since that North Carolina game. So in their last 8, they've held teams to fewer than 70 in 8 of them, and for DJ Burns, he tried to keep NC State lively in this one. He had 27 points, but NC State also won 7 of 14 at the free throw line. Meanwhile, Jeremy Roach, 21 big points in this one for Duke. Duke now 18-11-1 against the spread thus far this season. Conference tournaments have officially begun in the Atlantic Sun. You saw Jacksonville be able to take down Kennesaw State, Coel's by a count of 92-86. As for Jacksonville, they go 13 of 21 from 3, and they were really trending towards the under towards the back half of the season, but they just got hot in this one, and Kennesaw State, the end of the season, 9-18-2 against the spread. And Queens NC, our good buddy Nick Lawrenson, is able to get the job done. 69-63 the final. That puts an end to a Florida Gulf Coast season that was just all over the stinking place. And for Queens, they have been a rough defense all season long, but they put the clamps down. They did a nice job forcing Florida Gulf Coast into 16 turnovers. Isaiah Thompson supplied 31 points for Florida Gulf Coast, but AJ McKee countered that for Queens with 23 points. So they're able to go on. They're able to advance. So that was very nice to see. A lot of the other action that was a little bit of smaller ball, and out there in the Big Sky, we had our DK Network right to pick come through as we were on the under in Montana State versus Weber State of 144.5, and that gets us 21 games above 500. This one lands 76-64 with Montana State being able to get it done, as Weber State still has been a up and down team against the spread this season, 12-16 against the spread, so it's been a little bit wonky there, but for this Weber State team, they just hit a falling knife with Montana State. Montana State was 13 of 27 from 3. They were hitting some acrobatic shots as they had 4 starters be able to log double figures for both of these teams. They kept it relatively clean. Weber State actually won the turnover battle 12-9, but they just needed to have guys help out Dylan Jones. He had 24 points, 9 boards, 3 assists, 3 steals, but not a lot around him, and that was very costly. Eastern Washington, no cover for them. They're now 17-11-1 against the spread, but they do get the outright win against Sacramento State, 91-88. We'll certainly be talking some Big Sky in segment number 2 with our good friend Curtis Rogers, but Dane Erickstrup, the 6'11" combo player, came in off the bench and rescued this Eastern Washington team. He had 24 points, went 3 of 5 from 3-point range, and Sacramento State 18 out of 31 from 3-point range, and they lose this game. And the reason why, they lose the turnover battle 18-14, and they also lost the rebound battle. So despite the fact that they got mucho caliente from 3-point range, they were unable to get it done there. But Northern Colorado, they're now 14-14-1 against the spread, but they've really been making me some money recently. They win by a count of 82-74 against Northern Arizona and Montana. Now 17-11 against the spread. They win by double figures against Idaho State. This by a count of 79-65 as for Montana, Aiden Moody, he's really been in the mood for putting up points. He had 22 in this one. For Montana, they win this game, by the way, going just 5 of 19 from 3-point range. They won the turnover battle 7-8. They actually lose the rebound battle, but did much more down low. They were able to shoot overall 60% from the field. Despite their cold 3-point shooting, they went north of 70% from the floor from 2-point range. And if you're looking at other action that we saw on Monday, certainly you always get a whole bunch of SWAC and MEAC games. And out there in the MEAC, by the way, you saw Morgan State go from being about a 4-point underdog on the open to being a 9-point underdog on the close, and they went outright 88-79. Word to the wise here. Some of these line moves are not correct. NC Central, by the way, is actually 16-8 against the spread. They've been highly profitable with that regard, but Morgan State had Will Thomas be able to slide the team with 30 points in this one. A big reason why Morgan State was able to get it done, and I just don't know why this line moves so much, because Winston Tabbs and all the guys that we know and love for Morgan State played in this game, and for NC Central, they were at full force as well, but just very, very strange, to say the least. You've also got Howard now at 10-16-2 against the spread, but they do take down Delaware State by a count of 85-66, so yay verily there. And out there in the Southland, they've got one of the better teams that you're going to find in all of college basketball, McNeese. They came up just short of being able to cover against Houston Christian. That's because they were laying about 28 points on the close, but they do get the outright win, 87-69. It is a McNeese team that is just 14-12 against the spread. We've seen the numbers go up very much on them, but a team that has been able to make you money all season long is Texas A&M Corpus Christi. They're 18-7-1 against the spread. Now, they got that number up just a little bit too lofty as well. They were unable to get the cover against the Rollins as a 14.5-point favorite, but still relatively solid performance, 73-60 the final is for New Orleans. They go 8 of 17 from 3-point range, and I'm not even kidding here. They went 11 of 41 on their 2-point shots. You had Jordan Johnson provide 16 points, 3 assists, 0 rebounds, and 4 turnovers. So that was very interesting to say the least, as Texas A&M Corpus Christi, they won the battle on the glass 41-35. And this Corpus Christi team has been really good to the under as well. Texas A&M Corpus Christi, as far this season, 16 unders, 9 overs, and just 1 push. So they've been able to do a tremendous job on that front. And if you're looking at demonstrative teams with regards to the over, Howard, who I mentioned a minute ago, they're now at 17 overs, 10 unders, and a push as well. So they've been a good bankroll builder there. And a team has been very nicely under for you thus far this season. That would be Southern, as Southern out there in the SWAC has been a very fascinating team. They've been one of the best efficiency defenses at home all season long. On the road, that is just not translated whatsoever. But we did see them in action on Monday, and they found a way to get the win and cover against Florida A&M, 58-44. Florida A&M goes 0 of 5 from 3-point range. Southern goes 7 of 16, but this was just a sloppy game. 16 turnovers for Florida A&M on 16 made buckets, 23 made buckets for Southern. They had 17 turnovers, and Southern, they go 5 of 11 at the free throw line. They do cover the 10.5-point spread, but man, that thing was quite an eyesore to say the least. And another team has been very demonstrative with regards to totals as well, going back out there to the Big Sky. How about what we've been seeing thus far this season out of Idaho State? I just hit on them a minute ago, and their game against Montana, it was a little bit underwhelming, but still 19 overs, 9 unders, and a push for them on the over. Eastern Washington, 19 overs, 9 unders, and a push. And Northern Colorado, 18 overs, 9 unders, and 2 pushes. So we have been seeing things be very overwhelming out there in the Big Sky as well. And then also out there in the SWAC, it's been interesting to watch this team all season long, because it has been very much a rocky road, and it has been up and down for them. But out there in the SWAC, we've got Alcorn State at 16-12 against the spread, and they get the win outright against Texas Southern by kind of 82-79, as Texas Southern was about a 4.5-point favorite with Jeremiah Kendall being able to supply the team with 27 points. And if you're looking just in conference play, it has been absolutely magnificent for them, going 12-4 against the spread. Well, Prairie View, they're 3-14 against the spread in SWAC play. They lose to Jackson State by kind of 79-74, and Prairie View in this game was about a 2.5-point underdog. And if you're looking just overall at what we're seeing in college basketball, right now it's been a whole bunch of overs for the season. 51.1% of games going over, 2,584 overs to 2,468 unders, and home underdogs have just continued to struggle. 693, 728, and 23 against the spread. Home underdogs hitting just 48.8% for the season, and it's been even worse the last 7 days. 44, 58, and 1 against the spread for home underdogs, while overs hitting at a 53% clip. 175 overs to 155 unders. So that's what we're seeing in college basketball right now, and that's what we all got on Monday. Now let's take a look at the West Coast landscape of college basketball with our good friend Curtis Rogers of 710 Seattle Sports right here on Coast Guys Hoops with myself, Greg Hughes and now a part of the Beasley Family Podcast. And we're back here in lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast with myself, Greg Peters, and now part of the Beasley Family Podcast. It is always great to be joined by this man, Curtis Rogers. He does absolutely amazing work over at 710 Seattle Sports, taking a look at everything that you're able to find in the Pacific Northwest, whether that be hockey with the Seattle Kraken, football with the Washington Huskies, the Seattle Seahawks, all things college basketball as well. That includes Gonzaga, that includes Seattle, Eastern Washington. So the big schools and the schools that deserve a little bit more love, well, he lends them that love, and we love having him on this podcast. As you're able to follow Curtis on Twitter/X, along with Instagram, at A Kid From Kent, all together. And Curtis, always a pleasure, my friend. Thank you.
I love coming on with you, especially this time of year. It's the regular season. We're down to the final weekend of the regular season across many conferences, and heck, even conference tournament play starting soon too for some conferences. There is no better time than right now to get into college basketball, and what an exciting fight to the finish it's going to be in some of these conference races, especially up here in the Northwest and out here on the West Coast. Things are really, really coming down to the very end.
Oh, they certainly are, and only a few appearances left before we turn the page over to baseball season as well. That's when you know that things are really coming to a head, but I know that out there in the great state of Washington, really the main two teams that you're probably taking a look at right now is Washington State with the great season that they're having. And how about the Gonzaga Bulldogs over the weekend going to St. Mary's, punking the Gales? What have you made out of this Gonzaga team? Because we've talked about them quite a bit, and I feel like the tenor has been up and down with them, but dare I say that unlike in most years, Gonzaga this year, they are certainly peaking at the right time, and they actually were able to get a big-time non-conference win in February, unlike all these other years as well.
Yeah, their ability to win with their backs against the wall here over the last month has been incredible to watch. That's why Mark Few is one of the best coaches in America. I mean, he has been able to get his guys to play some pretty inspired ball here down the stretch in the WCC. Obviously not able to come away with the regular season title, but definitely able to salvage an NCAA tournament berth for sure, I think, which became priority number one over anything that had to do with the WCC conference regular season title. And, you know, picking up that road win at Rupp Arena against Kentucky, that was a big domino to fall. And then I think the levee just broke on Saturday night as Gonzaga knocked off St. Mary's and did so in convincing fashion, too. About as dominant of a performance from Gonzaga as we've seen all season long. They had to have it. They got it. I don't think they're on the bubble anymore. I don't think they're even in the first four anymore. I think they're squarely in the field of 64 as we kind of wait for, you know, all the teams to make it out of Dayton. I think what Gonzaga has been able to do over the season's final month has firmly put them in the NCAA tournament, regardless, I think, of any result in the WCC tournament.
Yep, I agree with you. Unless the Pacific makes a run and then beats them by like 50 points or something like that, which then we've got to be wondering what life is at this point. I do agree with you as well. And I just take a look at this WCC tournament, and we thought it might be a little bit different. And I do think that San Francisco has formed themselves as a very clear number 3, but I'm not sure about you, but I just still take a look at it. I think that it's going to be Gonzaga versus St. Mary's that, evil star number 1 and evil star number 2 going at it. And I just don't see a way that any of these other teams are really able to make too much of a run and really threaten either of these two.
It feels like Gonzaga and St. Mary's Chapter 3 is going to be on deck for the final of the WCC tournament. What's interesting to me is looking at this conference, it has really been the tale of just two conferences really within the WCC. It's Gonzaga, it's St. Mary's, it's San Francisco, and Santa Clara. Those are the clear-cut 4 best teams in the conference. And of those 4 teams, Santa Clara is the only team to lose a conference game this year outside of those 4. So Gonzaga lost to St. Mary's, they lost to Santa Clara, and then you've got San Francisco. They've lost all 5 of their games in conference play to Gonzaga, St. Mary's, and Santa Clara, so on and so forth. St. Mary's losing to Gonzaga. So they've beaten up on each other, but nobody from the bottom half of the conference has been able to knock off any of those 4. So it just feels like we're on a collision course for those 4 teams to be the Final 4 remaining. And then having Gonzaga and St. Mary's, just it feels like they're still leaps and bounds ahead of the rest of the conference. Like you said, San Francisco cementing themselves as a nice number 3 option in the WCC. But with how Gonzaga has played recently and just how St. Mary's kind of rolled through the WCC up until Saturday night against Gonzaga, it feels like those two teams are on a collision course once again. And then, just how the seeding works in the WCC tournament. It's interesting because I don't think any other conference does it like this, where the top 2 seeds have automatic berths all the way to the semifinal. You really only have to play 2 games if you're a top 2 seeded team in the WCC. So just setting that up very nicely, having those 2 teams just absolutely miss the war of attrition that would be having to play, 4 games in 4 nights. Instead, you're only going to have to play a back-to-back. That seems pretty advantageous for whoever is in that driver's seat in the WCC, and it always seems to be Gonzaga, and it always seems to be St. Mary's.
Yep, it always does seem to be. And how about a shout-out to Santa Clara as well? They won 3 games against the Pac-12 this season, and you had Oregon State win 4 games within the Pac-12 this year, so they had 1 fewer win against Pac-12 teams than Oregon State. That shows you the state of that program, as Curtis Rogers, who does such good work over at 710 Seattle Sports, is joining me right here on Coast to Coast Hoops. And I really do think that says a lot about the Pac-12 right now, because I do think that we're able to say very unequivocally there's 2 top teams right now in the Pac-12. Arizona's that very clear number 1. I think Washington State has done everything they can to really be that number 2. That was really cemented with Oregon just getting lambasted against Arizona over the weekend. But how do you take a look at some of these other teams heading into Las Vegas? Because I think Utah is a little bit of an interesting team. It looked like UCLA had raided the ship, but they've taken some steps back. And Colorado is a team that they were able to shoot it from 3 at home, but I just don't trust them away from Boulder.
Yeah, Colorado is an interesting one to me because you see the talent on their roster. I mean, Tristan Da Silva, Williams is on that roster. KJ Simpson, he can shoot it. But like you said, outside of the Coors Event Center, I mean, they have really, really struggled to play some consistent ball. Utah is a team that, pushed Arizona to the absolute limit in triple overtime, losing a very close game to them. That was at Huntsman Center in Salt Lake City. So I look at the Utes as a team that could maybe wiggle their way into the conference title game if things were to break their way. But it does feel like Chapter 3, Arizona-Washington State, is going to be on tap for the conference title game. Now, Washington State has had an interesting 3 games since that incredible game, that classic that they played against Arizona and McHale Center, coming away with the victory. Losing a surprise one to ASU and then getting everything that they could handle from USC the following game after that ASU game, but then kind of riding the ship against UCLA. Credit to them for being able to sweep the LA schools. I know the LA schools have been among the biggest disappointments in all of college basketball this year. But Kyle Smith really has this team believing, and they believe in themselves. Miles Rice, Isaac Jones, Isaiah Watts, Jalen Wells. It just feels like it's a different guy every single game. And Yakimovsky, too. He's been a lot of fun to watch. Cougs Ball Club, they are in a good spot to win the regular season title because they just have a game against Washington remaining. And Washington is pretty much, dead man walking right now. Mike Hopkins, I know there was the report from Jeff Goodman over the weekend saying that, Hopkins is pretty much a done deal after this season. They don't have a whole lot left to play for except for pride, but I don't know how you can be proud of the effort that the Huskies have put forth this season. So I think the Cougs are just going to put them out of their misery Meanwhile, Arizona has that road test still remaining at USC and at UCLA this weekend. So nothing is a done deal atop the conference other than the fact that those teams have already clinched byes into the second round of the Pac-12 tournament. But it just feels like Wazoo and Arizona have set themselves so far apart from everybody else in the conference. Not to say that an upset won't happen, but I don't really see it happening right now. I think it's going to be chalk in the Pac-12.
Yep, I agree with you. And you mentioned Mike Hopkins and the fact that he should be on his way out at Washington. For the love of Pete, can we end our Jared Haas nightmare? I mean, this team for Stanford is now 12-17, and they're third worst in the Pac-12. They've actually got a worse record than Washington in the Pac-12 right now. My goodness, another underachievement from Stanford, but a man that always achieves very well is Curtis Rogers, and he does such good work over at 710 Seattle Sports. You're going to be right here on Coast to Coast Hoops. Now, we don't know what happened on Monday with Eastern Washington. They were wrapping up their regular season against Sacramento State, but going into the conference tournament out there in the Big Sky, they are going to be indeed the number one overall seed. And just how do you take a look at this Big Sky tournament? Because I do think that it just all runs through Eastern Washington, though I will say there are a lot of good go-to performers in this entire conference. Like over at Montana State, you've got Robert Ford. You've got Mr. Jones over there at Weber State and Dylan Jones. St. Thomas over at Northern Colorado. And I think we might be in for some fireworks in the Big Sky, though Eastern Washington, obviously, that clear favorite.
Yeah, Eastern, I mean, they're looking to right the wrongs of last year. It was a very similar road to get here in 2023, 2024 as it was last year in 22-23, where they rolled through the regular season and then slipped up at the end of the regular season and then the Big Sky tournament. I think this Eastern Washington Eagles team is going to remember how it ended last year, and I think they're going to be a very motivated bunch. You mentioned Weber State. They were among the conference favorites to start this season. You know, obviously they're not at the very top yet. That's a team that is very capable of knocking anybody off in the Big Sky. You mentioned Montana State as well, the Bobcats. You look at, you know, just how they've been able to have success too recently. I mean, heck, their former head coach, Danny Sprinkle, is now at Utah State, and he's really living it up too with the Aggies in the Mountain West. So I think this is going to be a very competitive Big Sky tournament. I think there is going to be a lot of potential for chaos for sure. I think anytime you look at a mid-major tournament, there is going to be opportunities abound for teams to kind of sneak up and win those tournaments and find their way into the big dance as a 15 seed, a 16 seed, what have you. I think Eastern Washington, though, is my pick to win the Big Sky tournament. They just seem to be on a mission right now, and I hope that they don't forget that feeling last year of losing everything that they had worked towards. I mean, they were rolling through the Big Sky. I think they got up to like a 14-0 start last year in the Big Sky Conference before falling in their final game of the regular season. I think maybe it was the final two games of the regular season, if I remember correctly, and then falling in the Big Sky tournament. I don't see that happening this year, but I would not be stunned if I'm wrong. I would not be stunned at all because, like I said, mid-major tournaments, anything can happen.
Yep, and when it comes to taking a look at these mid-majors, how much do you take a look at something that I was laying out with the Big Sky? There being so many takeover guys because you've got St. Thomas over in Northern Colorado, you've got Dylan Jones, guys like this, while Eastern Washington, I think we both agree, while they've got a lot of really good players, I wouldn't consider anyone necessarily takeover guys. Cedric Howard has been their top scorer, but they've got pretty much 6 different guys that give you at least 9.5 points per game, while these other teams like Northern Colorado, they're more top-heavy. They do still have that more dominant, just single player.
Right, and this time of year, you would kill to have a guy that can just take over a game and score on his own, especially if you're not able to run your offense and set everything up and just get everything going that way. You would kill to have a guy that can just score 30 at will and just be like, you know what, I'm taking over this game right now. I don't need anybody else's help. Guard play is so important this time of year. Yeah, the bigs are important too, but you got to have a solid backcourt if you want to win in March. And, to be able to have a guy that can kind of call his own shot is such a luxury in college basketball because there are only so few available out there. You mentioned Eastern Washington and just how they don't really have that guy that can take over a game. I think that is a big concern for sure, especially when you get into tournament play and things aren't falling like they would normally over the course of a game. Everything that you game plan for. If that's not going to go, you got to find other ways to get the ball in the bucket. And it's great to have guys that are able to kind of, put the team on their back, call for an ISO, get 2 points, get to the line, get a three or something. When everything breaks down, which it will in March, everything breaks down for every team. We're talking about 18 to 22-year-olds. Everything will break down, especially when we get, past the final TV timeout of regulation. You got to have that guy on your team that you are just absolutely confident in and want to get the ball to. Those guys are the heroes of March, and I could definitely see that happening in these smaller conference tournaments for sure.
Oh, there's no question about it. These smaller conference tournaments are so much fun because you know that absolutely everything is on the line for them, as Curtis Rogers, who does such good work over at 710 Seattle Sports, showing to me right here on Coast to Coast Hoops. And Curtis, it's one of my favorite questions to ask you because you do a great job covering a little bit of everything. Who's a team or two that you're taking a look at that either you're feeling very, very bullish or bearish on with what we've seen the last few weeks? I remember one of your answers from a few weeks ago, by the way, in the Wisconsin Badgers that you were shocked down on. Well, that has certainly continued, and man, that is rough to say the least. But who's a team right now that you have a good feel on that either they are ascending or declining, in your opinion?
Well, if we're going bullish, how about a team named the Bulls, the USF Bulls?
Yes.
I mean, they have won, 14 in a row? Amir Abdur-Rahim, what a coaching job he has done in year one. I mean, heck, you look at his coaching jobs at Kennesaw State, his first year winning one game and then taking them to the NCAA tournament just a year ago. I mean, this USF team last year was just middle of the road, nothing to write home about. And now they are on the verge of, I believe, their first ever NCAA tournament, if I'm not mistaken, or at least one in recent seasons. But what's weird about them, Greg, is how low their net rating is. They are ranked in the AP Top 25, but I believe as of Sunday night, I think their net rating was 79, which I think is among the lowest net ratings ever for a ranked team. And I think it was even higher than that a week ago, which I think it was like in the 90s or something ridiculous like that. Not a lot of love from the net rating for USF, but hey, 14 in a row is 14 in a row. And I think they have done a very phenomenal job in year one. Hopefully Amir Abdur-Rahim can stick around at USF for a little while. I know he's going to be a hot coaching commodity here when the coaching carousel gets cranked up. Obviously, ACC and SEC jobs, USF is in that footprint. So there's going to be teams definitely sniffing around, but shout out to the Bulls for having a remarkable first season under new head coach Amir Abdur-Rahim, and I hope that they are able to pay it off in the NCAA tournament.
Oh, there's no question about it. And the Bulls, they've been taking it by the horns. They have been looking so good this season. And Curtis, you've done such a good job this season every single time you've joined this podcast. We are now at the best time of year. March is here. I know that you're very locked into everything that we're getting. High major, low major, mid major, you cover it all. So let the good people at home know it's all on tap for you and how people can follow along on social media and other platforms.
Yeah, we're going to have a ton of coverage coming up here. Obviously, we talked about the Mike Hopkins potential dismissal coming up here in the coming days. We'll be talking about that. And then obviously the Cougs and Zags, they have dominated headlines here over the last few weeks. If the Cougs making a run for their first Pac-12 title since 1941. We're talking pre-United States involvement in World War II, Greg. That's how long it's been since the Cougs have won a Pac-12 conference championship in basketball. They're only a half game back of Arizona, so we're obviously talking about that a lot up here in the Northwest. SeattleSports.com is the place to be, and you can also follow along on Twitter and Instagram at A Kid From Kent. I've got plenty of reactions to all those games coming up. It's going to be a really fun time. I know it's going to be a blast down in your neck of the woods, Greg, over the next couple of weeks, especially with all the conference tournaments going on. This time of year, Greg, I am so jealous of you getting to be amongst all the college basketball crazies.
Oh, yes. It is so much fun with college basketball. And you get to see all these people are going to be in attendance a little bit later on, wagering on their teams at the book, being like, oh, I want Grand Canyon or something like that because the WAC tournament is out here. The Big West tournament is out here. Certainly, we're going to be seeing some nice WCC action as well. You're able to go down the list of Pac-12. It is so much fun. And what else is fun is getting Curtis Rogers on the show. He does such a good job taking a look at the sport that we all know and love. A big thanks to him for joining me right here on Coast to Coast Hoops. And coming up next, it is that time of the podcast. I give you picks and analysis on every game on the betting board for this College Basketball Tuesday as we eat some bench shots. And we're back here in lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the VC Family Podcast, and it is always great to get Curtis Rogers aboard. He does such good work over at 710 Seattle Sports, taking a look at this great game of basketball that we all know and love, and just anything Pacific Northwest. He's your man for that. He does pre- and post-game hosting when it comes to the Seattle Mariners when that's in season, obviously the Eastern Washington Eagles, along with the Gonzaga Bulldogs, all those Washington teams out there in the Pac-12, and so much more. He does a great job of being able to cover those and always lends great insights on this podcast. Big thanks to him for joining me in the last segment. Now it is that time in the podcast. They give you picks and analysis on every game on the betting board for this College Basketball Tuesday as we hit some bank shots.
Most financial establishments close at a certain time, but not here. It is time for a side and total on every game on today's betting board bank shots.
Do note that, as per usual, any changes that are made to these plays will be listed up on my Twitter /X feed at @GNN_D1, and we're going to be going in Las Vegas rotation order. This is where we go with the games with 3 digits on the rotation first, so those involve the bigger conferences, and then the teams in smaller conferences. This is the Atlantic Sun. This is also the America East, the Patriot League. I believe that if we have any NEC action, that's going to be there as well. Those are going to be the games at the bottom, and then the games that are last as well are these conference tournament games, like the Sun Belt tournament, the Horizon League tournament. Those go in the back of the rotation, and those pretty much go by start time with regards to the tip time of those conference tournaments. So they actually are all put together for you. But let's get things started with 601, 602 on the betting board. Eastern Michigan, it's a road face-off against Akron. Akron is a 19.5 point favorite, and your total on this game is 135. This is an Eastern Michigan team that has been quite awful recently, but I will say this for Eastern Michigan. They've now given up fewer than 70 points in 4 out of their last 5 games, and I think this number has went a little bit too lofty. I'm going to be willing to take the 19.5. Is on my line at 18.5. Now, last time Akron went up against Eastern Michigan, it was a complete and utter lambasting. That was a game of which was 77-46 on the road. Ali in that one only had 5 points as well, and you got to think that he's going to be able to go for a little bit more as he's been logging 15.5 points. Still is only shooting 29% from 3-point range. He is actually the only of their top 5 scorers for Akron that is currently shooting below 35.8% from 3-point range, and Akron has been able to do a solid job with their defense all season long. A top 75 team with regards to points allowed on a per possession basis, but this is also an Akron team that does a relatively solid job of being able to put the ball in the basket, even though they're only about 225th in all of college basketball with regards to their 3-point shooting percentage. Or a top 100 team with regards to points scored on a per possession basis, and they go up against an Eastern Michigan team that they're well outside the top 250 in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, and also in terms of their rebound rate. Other than Jared Billingsley, who's been able to give you about 5 boards per contest, you just have not been able to get a ton down low. But I do think that this is a number that is getting a little bit too lofty, as you do have Ty Acuff on the side of Eastern Michigan, and he's been able to supply the team with north of 21 points per contest. Not an efficient shooter. He only shoots about 29 to 30% from 3-point range, but has been able to do a pretty rock-solid job there. And the bigger thing for Akron is that even though they're not a great 3-point shooting team, in a roadside shoot court environment, this is a bunch that is in the top 20 nationally with regards to their 2-point shooting percentage. And Enrique Freeman is a big reason why he leads the nation in rebounds with over 12.5 rebounds per contest, 18.3 points. He himself shoots 37.5% from 3 of the block and a half per contest, but you don't have a whole bunch outside of him. It has been an Akron team has really been able to get it going on offense. Last time they faced off against Eastern Michigan, they were able to get to 77 points in that one. And for this Akron team, they have been able to get to at least 73 points in now 3 out of their last 5 games, and really all but 2 of their games ever since that game against James Madison in the MAC versus Sun Belt Challenge. And I do think that Eastern Michigan going to be able to get a little bit more going on offense. Prior to that game that we saw against Miami of Ohio, where they were held to 57, they had gotten to at least 69 points 3 out of their last 4 games. They're starting to get a little bit more out of Orlando Lovejoy. He's been able to give you about 10 points per contest. For Eastern Michigan, they only shoot 31% from 3. Relatively low-tempo team, but I do think that Akron, they're going to be able to threaten 75, and they are going to be able to get the job done, especially against an Eastern Michigan team that, while Akron is not amazing from 3-point range away from home, Eastern Michigan, they are allowing opponents to shoot 35% from 3, and they've been one of the worst 2-point defenses in all of college basketball, but certainly a lower tempo team, and one that I think is going to be able to get a cuff going. So it is a circumstance where I did set my line at 18.5 and 19.5. I think we just went a little bit too far here. I'm going to be taking a look at the points, and with the way that Akron has been able to ascend on offense, I did set my total at a 136.5. So I'm going to be taking a look at this total over, and I'm going to be taking a look at the points with Eastern Michigan. 603, 604 on the betting board. It is VCU playing us to Duquesne. Duquesne. Duquesne, an underdog of 5 points. Your total on this game, you're going to be getting it at a 136 to a 136.5. Semi-total 133.5. I'm diving under. These are two teams that rank in the top 110 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and it's a VCU unit that just has not been able to get a whole heck of a lot in way of three-point shooting as well. So I do think that scoring is going to be a little bit more muted, especially with this Duquesne unit really only having two guys that will be able to step up and be able to provide this team with consistent offense. As you've had Jimmy Clark along Day Grant combined for about 32 to 33 points per contest, and outside of that, you don't have a single guy that gives you north of 8 points per contest. It is a Duquesne team that's out 63rd in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, so they do give up about 10.7 points more per 100 possessions when away from home rather than at home, going up against a VCU team that's more around 59th in the country with regards to points allowed on a per possession basis. And for VCU, they have been able to do a tremendous job all season long of locking down from three-point range, 16th in all of college basketball in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage, and they are going to have the most gifted scorer, in my opinion, out there on the floor in Max Shulga. Shulga has done a really nice job supplying the team with 14 points, darn near 40% shooting from three-point range, but they do go up against a Duquesne team that in a road or neutral court environment, they are allowing opponents to shoot just 31.7% from three-point range, and VCU has become a really low-tempo team. They're outside the top 225 in terms of total possessions per game. They turn the ball over North 12 times per contest. Now, what really puts it over the top for VCU, I did set them as a 5.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay the 5, is that they do shoot 79% at the free throw line as a collective. Each of your top four scorers, they do shoot at least 79% of the free throw line, and though this VCU team only has one player that gives you a north of 5 rebounds per game, two by Lowell, who's been able to give you about 5.9 rebounds per game. This is a top 75 team in terms of their rebound rate. And then you do have Fusani Drame on the Duquesne side, who's been able to give you about 5.5 rebounds per game, but Duquesne really just does not compare on the glass with regards to their rebound rate. This is a team that's checking in more around 204th in all of college basketball. And for Duquesne, defense has been great. 66 points for fierce runner in 4 of their last 5 games, but you have your question marks with the offense. For VCU, they have now given up at least 67 points in each of their last 5 games, but a little bit of that I feel like was a byproduct of playing much more up-tempo teams. Duquesne has really been slowing things down as the season has went along, and for Duquesne, you just don't have those reliable guys outside of Grant along with Jimmy Clark, as the team shoots 33% from 3. They turn the ball over 12 times per contest, and not really finding that number 3 score, I do think is going to be a little bit of a weakness for them, especially with Joe Bashmili for VCU being able to chip in their double figures, now being able to shoot about 40% from 3-point range. I do think that puts VCU over the top. So I did set VCU as a favorite of 5.5 points. I'm going to be willing to lay the number. I made my total 133.5. I also like this total under 605, 606 on the betting board. Liberty is a road face-off against Middle Tennessee State. Liberty is a 5.5 point favorite. Total on this game between 136 and 136.5. Made my total 129.5. I'm going to be taking a look at the under. This Middle Tennessee team just has not been able to get it going on offense all season long, well outside the top 310. In terms of points scored on a per possession basis, it's been a little bit better for them recently, but you also do have a Liberty team that does play at one of the slowest paces in all of college basketball. They are outside the top 310 in terms of total possessions per game. Lone trepidation that you do have with this Liberty defense is that they are giving up nearly 15 points more per 100 possessions when they're on the road rather than when they are at home, but Middle Tennessee just really doesn't have any outside threats. I like what they've gotten down low with about 7.5 boards, 11 points per game by Jared Coleman-Jones, and he shoots 44% from 3, but he's really their main threat from three-point range. Just nobody else is shooting above 34% from three-point range for this unit as a collective. They're turning the ball over 14.3 times per contest. They're outside the top 300 with regards to ball security, going up against a Liberty team that they are very dialed in. They do a nice job of being able to play as a collective. You got something like Joe Van Zandt who's able to give you 6 rebounds per game. Kyle Rohde chips in their 13 points, 4.5 boards, a few assists. They can be a little bit hot and cold with their three-point shooting defense, but all in all, pretty solid. 84th in all of college basketball for Middle Tennessee. Not an amazing defense, not a terrible defense for Middle Tennessee. They've done a pretty solid job of being able to lock it down from three-point range, allowing teams to shoot in that neighborhood about 28.9% from three-point range at home. That's a top 50 mark in all of college basketball overall if you include a home and road splits, or around about 120th. But I do think the Middle Tennessee going to be able to hold up defensively. They are going to be probably able to have a little bit of success on class with Coleman-Jones, but just don't have a lot in the backcourt for this team, as well as you've had Elias King be able to chip in there 13 points. Justin Porter, he gives you about 14, and both of these guys do shoot about 33% from three-point range, but not a lot of pop from 3 outside those two guys. nobody else other than Coleman Jones supplying north of 7.5 rebounds per game. I do think that's going to be rough for a Middle Tennessee team that, to their credit, they've won 3 out of their last 5 games, but they're up against a Liberty team that has been able to put the screws down on defense. This team has now given up 67 points or fewer in 4 out of their last 6 games, and last time these two teams played, it was an 88-53 blowout. I don't think it's going to be quite to that extent, but I do think that Middle Tennessee going to be held down once again. I did set Liberty as a 7.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay the number, and it's at my total 129.5. I'm looking under 607, 608 on the betting board. Western Michigan is playing us at Bowling Green. Bowling Green a 1.5 point favorite with your total 146, a 146.5, made by total 144.5. I'm going to be looking at the over. Bowling Green has been cranking up their tempo throughout the season. They're now a top 125 team in terms of total possessions per game, and much of this is just the Todd Simon just sort of coaching style. You may recall when he was over at Southern Utah and the brief time he was over at UNLV, he always wants to play up tempo, but he just doesn't have the shooters to be able to cash you this over. For Bowling Green, they're well outside the top 175 in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, with the crux of it being that they shoot 29.5% from 3-point range. Out of your entire roster, you've got one guy that shoots above 31.8% from 3-point range, and that's a big man in Jason Spurgeon, who shoots 34% from 3. Now, Bowling Green is going to be able to win the battle on the glass. This team is in the top 125 with regards to rebound rate, and despite the fact that Javonte Brown is back for Western Michigan, a 7-footer that's able to give you about 4.5 rebounds per game, and Titus Wright has been able to get right. He's able to give the team right around about 5.5 or so rebounds per game. It just doesn't compare to Spurgeon, along with Rashawn Agee being able to supply the team with about 15 rebounds per game. And then Marcus Hill is just your best scorer in this game. 21 points, 5 boards, doesn't shoot threes at all, but helps a Bowling Green unit only turn the ball over about 11.5 times per game. Considering their tempo, that's actually not too bad compared to Western Michigan, who turns the ball over 13.5 times per contest. They do shoot 34.5% from 3, and that's where you've got to hurt this Bowling Green team. As for Bowling Green, they do a nice job on the interior, they do a nice job on the glass, but they are 332nd in all of college basketball in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage, and Western Michigan, they themselves are giving it up from 3-point range. They allow opponents in a road/neutral court venue to shoot 34.8% from 3. That declines to about 33% when they're at home, but we've got B. Artis White, who's been inconsistent all season long, shoots about 36% from 3, 9.5 points per game, has been a little bit in and out of the fold. Owen Lobsinger, he's got size at 6'9", but we've seen a deterioration with his game, just 24 total points in his last 3 games, and they've been looking to Seth Hubbard to really take over the show. Hubbard has been able to give you 14 points, but only shoots about 38% from the floor, and for Western Michigan in a nip-and-tuck game, this team as a collective shoots 62.5% the free throw line. That's a bottom 25 mark in all of college basketball for Bowling Green. Offense has been just all sorts of rough. 60 points or fewer scored in 4 of their last 5 games. Western Michigan has now given up at least 69 points in 4 of their last 5 games. Something's got to give, and I do think that it's going to be the offense. I think that it's going to be a little bit rough for both teams to score, but I do think that in the end, Bowling Green utilizes their rebounding and their just prowess on the glass to be able to get it done. Set my line at 4.5. I'm going to be willing to lay with Bowling Green, and then set my total 144.5. Also looking under 609, 610 on the betting board. Ball State plays us at Kent State. Kent State between a pick'em to a 1.5 point favorite with your total 141 to 141.5. With Kent State, I did submit them as a 4-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to take them on this rather pick'em line. Have a Ball State unit that has been having ups and downs all season long, I think is the best way of putting it. And for Ball State, they do leave themselves very vulnerable from the outside. In terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage, are well outside the top 250 in all of college basketball, but they do a relatively solid job of being able to have Bashir Jihad just go out night in, night out and perform. Steal and a block per contest for Jihad, 19 points, 8 boards, shoots 37.5% from 3, and for what Ball State doesn't do with their perimeter defense, they do shooting the ball themselves. Out of their top 5 scorers, 4 of them do shoot at least 37% from 3-point range. Got a pair of guys in Mikey Pearson along with Davion Bailey that both give you about 12.5 points per contest. They combine to shoot about 40% from 3-point range, but I do think the Kent State, a defense has really declined from last season. Last season, they were a top 35 team in all of college basketball in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, while outside the top 100 this season. I do think that they're going to do a nice job putting the screws down for Kent State on the road. They allow opponents to shoot 31.9% from distance. north of 35% when they're at home. And you've had Jared Sullinger along with Giovanni Santiago be able to take over this backcourt. Santiago had to take over the point guard duties for Sincere Carey. He's been able to log 4 assists, steal and a half per game, while being able to give you just 9 points per contest, while Sullinger has been the main scorer. 15 points, shoots about 41% from three-point range. They face off against a Ball State unit that is well outside the top 225 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. And though Kent State, not the same team that they were a season ago in terms of being able to generate turnovers, they do have much more down low with Chris Payton shooting 38% from three, chips in their blocks, 7.5 boards, 12.5 points per game. I do think that with Ball State being outside the top 170 with regards to their rebound rate, with the way that we have been seeing this Kent State team doing a relatively solid job with Chris Payton and company, and just turn the ball over a little bit less, as it did take a little bit of time for Giovanni Santiago to be able to find his footing as the team's point guard. I do think that Kent State is going to be able to pull this one out against a Ball State team that just hasn't been able to guard the three-point shot all season long. Circumstance where I did set Kent State as a 4-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to take them on this rather pick 'em line. Do you think that this is going to be close enough for late game following Kent State, a top 130 team with regards to total possessions per game? So did set my total 142. Looking at the over, and I'm looking at Kent State. 6-11, 6-12 on the betting board. It is Tulane on the road facing up against South Florida, and South Florida is a 6.5 to a 7.5 point favorite. Total on this game between 156 and 157. This sets South Florida as a 7.5 point favorite. Need a 7 or less, but I'm going to be willing to lay this number. It's been coming down a little bit on South Florida. I don't know if South Florida is quite as good as their top 25 ranking, but man, this team is doing all the little things right now. South Florida has been a beast on defense, top 60 team in all of college basketball in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and one of the best teams in the country at being able to guard the three-point arc. South Florida, 21st in the country with this respect, and you've got a Tulane team that has been in a road or neutral court environment, allowing teams to shoot 36.2% from three, and for Tulane, they're just getting lambasted on the glass. They are outside the top 320 in terms of their rebound rate. This Tulane bunch has Kevin Cross, who's been able to do a nice job of just stuffing the stat sheet. 17.5 points, 7 boards, 4.5 assists per contest, but they really don't have a true post presence. It's he and Sion James, who are the only two guys that provide north of 4.2 rebounds per game, and it's just very interesting to look at this Tulane team. They've got pretty much 6 different guys that play at least 25 minutes, and they've got one other player that comes off the bench, and yet they're a top 20 team in terms of total possessions per game. I feel like they're just wearing down at the end of games due to their lack of depth, and you've got Jalen Forbes, who's able to shoot 34% from three, and all in all, Tulane, they do shoot about 35% from the outside, with only turning the ball over in that neighborhood about 11 to 11.5 times per game. That's actually really, really good for the tempo that they play at. Top 20 team in all of college basketball in that regard, but I do feel like South Florida, with their overall quickness, versatility, they're going to be the big elixir to this. And South Florida, even though they're more around 200th with regards to rebound rate, they certainly have an advantage down low. You've got Sultan Miguel along with Chris Youngblood, who've been able to supply the team with a combined about 30 points per contest, both shooting north of 40% from three. And for South Florida, overall this season, they're shooting 36.3% from three. But if you look ever since that game against Florida State, they were one of the worst three-point shooting teams in all of college basketball going in. Ever since that game, they've really been able to do a nice job, hitting north of 38.5% of their threes ever since then. I do think that this Tulane team is going to be a little bit overmatched. Tulane does a nice job of being able to generate turnovers, but South Florida's done a nice job taking care of the ball in their own right. There's not a single guy in the roster that has turned the ball over north of 1.6 times per game. You've been able to get good facilitation with about 3 assists per game out of Jaden Reed as well. I like the way that this South Florida team is trending in. I don't think that this is a good matchup for Tulane. I did set my total 159.5. Recognize that South Florida has been doing a really good job of being able to defend the three ball, but I do think that we might see a little bit more of a, shall we say, downfall there. I do think that Tulane is going to be able to hit a few threes, but I also think that with South Florida having Keshawn Pryor be able to give you 7.5 rebounds per game, that they are going to be able to win that battle down low against the Tulane team that's given up now at least 78 points in each of their last 5 games, while the South Florida team has gone to at least 76 in 3 out of their last 4. So looking at the over, and with South Florida, want to lay up to 7 with them. 6-13, 6-14 on the betting board. Notre Dame, it's ready to face off against North Carolina. North Carolina between a 14.5 to a 15-point favorite. Your total on this game, it is between 137.5 and 138. I did set North Carolina 16.5-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay it. Now, this Notre Dame team has been very good in conference, and Notre Dame comes in very silently, having won 5 out of their last 6 games, coming off of a nice triumph against Clemson, but I just fear this team having to hit the road now, because much of their success, it has been coming at home. They had that road win against Louisville, but that's Louisville, and for Notre Dame, they've got a very clear and distinct style. Make things as slow and yucky as humanly possible. They're 62nd in all of college basketball in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, but look at the offensive efficiency. 317th in the country in a road or neutral court environment. They're averaging about 6 points fewer per 100 possessions than their already low output, and they have to face off against a North Carolina unit that has been a top 35 team. 30 points allowed on a per possession basis, and a North Carolina team that is in the top 35 with regards to rebound rate. Harrison Ingram, Armando Bacot, they're combined for 26.5 points, 19.5 boards, with Ingram now shooting 39.5% from three-point range. And by the way, is the only of their top 4 scorers that shoots below 79.5% at the free throw line. So it is rather impressive what they've got there, as RJ Davis has been able to supply the team with about 3.5 assists per contest, and North Carolina has been really a buzzsaw when they've been out there on their home floor. And for this North Carolina team, I was talking about the home and road splits that you've got with Notre Dame. How about North Carolina in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, registering about 13.6 points more per 100 possessions when they're at home? They've really done a nice job of doing the little things. They only turn the ball over about 10.5 times per contest as well. Now, I do like what Brandon Shrewsbury has brought to the table. He's now logging about 10 points per contest. He was very much an afterthought towards being part of the season, but who knew the coach's son could ball out? He has been able to get the team double figures in 5 out of the last 7 games as well. He's been able to shoot a pretty respectable about 37.5% from three-point range, which expands to 42.5% away from home. But I think that this is going to be much of what we've seen with Notre Dame throughout the last few games. Very slow, very grimy, yucky. You've got Marcus Burton, who's a good top scorer for Notre Dame with 17 points, 4.5 assists, 2 steals per game, but it's 3.7 turnovers per game. That's also a top 5 mark in all of college basketball in a category where you do not want it to be. I do think that North Carolina going to be able to bear down in. Well, I do think that Notre Dame continues to get their style. I do think that they slow this game down. I do think that they make this an eyesore. I just don't think that they execute, even though they do get their style. I set my total 134.5. I'm looking at the under. And North Carolina made them a 16.5 point favorite, so I'm going to be willing to lay the number. 6:15, 6:16 on the bang board. Toledo, it's the road to face off against Miami of Ohio. And Miami of Ohio is a home underdog of between 2 and 2.5 points. Total on this game, it is 150 to 150.5. I said Miami of Ohio as an underdog of 4.5 points. I'm going to be willing to lay with Toledo. Toledo, as per usual, is just not great with regards to their defense, well outside the top 200 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, but it's just really hard to have a lot of faith in Miami of Ohio. A team that has done a really good job of locking down from three-point range, a top 45 team in opponent's three-point shooting percentage, but the Toledo bunch is much more than just popping threes. You've got 3 primary scorers in Raheem Maz, Tyler Cochran, coupled with Dante Maddox. They've all been able to do a nice job combining for about 45.5 to 46 points per contest. With all 3 of these guys, they give you at least 4 rebounds per game. And as a matter of fact, for Toledo, each of your top 4 scorers have been able to log at least 4 rebounds per contest. And they get to go up against the Miami of Ohio team that is getting just torched on the glass. 321st in all of college basketball with regards to rebound rate. Not that the Toledo team is like some sort of amazing team or anything like that on the boards. They're about 190th with regards to their rebound rate, but they should be able to win that battle down low. Been able to get some good production recently. Javon Simmons was now shooting in the mid-30s from three-point range. He's been able to give the team at least 8 points, and now each out of his last 10 games. It's been really a good run for him as well. And then you've got a Miami of Ohio team that has been very touch and go with regards to their onside shooting, a place where you're able to really light up this Toledo team. Toledo's outside the top 260 in terms of opponent's three-point shooting percentage, while Miami of Ohio has been relying upon Anderson Marmbeau along with Darwishi Hunter to lead the team in scoring. They combine for about 25 points per contest. With Hunter, he shoots 36.5% from 3, and overall, it's not a bad three-point shooting team. They shoot about 36.9% from the outside, but outside of Marmbeau and Hunter, you don't have a single guy in the roster that gives you north of 7.7 points per game. You really don't have that main facilitator, Bryce Boltman, who's 6'5", a little bit of a do-it-all player, has been leading the team with about 2.7 assists per contest. Bradley Dean, one of their top scorers, has been in and out of the fold as a 41% three-point shooter that longs about 7 points per game. It truly is a whole is greater than some of its parts approach with them, and I just don't think that Miami of Ohio is going to be able to gain the consistency, and I think that they get blown away on the glass to make it very difficult to be able to pull it off in this one, especially with Miami of Ohio just being a bunch that is 232nd in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, because they just don't have anything down low as well. So a circumstance where I'm going to be willing to trust in Toledo in this ordeal, set them as a favorite of 4.5 points, and did set my total at 152.5. So I'm going to be willing to lay with Toledo. And with this total, I'm going to be willing to take it over with the way that Toledo has now given up at least 75 points in 4 of their last 5 games. And Miami of Ohio, they themselves have been a bit all over the place with their offense, but they've gotten past 80 in 2 of their last 5. So looking at the over and willing to lay with Toledo 6-17, 6-18 on the betting board. Purdue is on the road facing off against Illinois. Illinois is a favorite of 2 points. Their total on this game is between 163.5 and 164. And with Purdue, I did make them the underdog of 1 point here at 2. That is my buy point on Purdue. With Illinois, this bunch has done a really nice job on the glass. They're a top 20 team in terms of their rebound rate, and for Purdue, it's going to be a case where Giant of the Year Zach Edey should still be able to have a big game, but now you have to go up against Coleman Hawkins, who's got a whole bunch of versatility. He's logging for the team north of 12 points, 6 boards, is lighting it up from 3-point range. Now, I will say this about Illinois. If you look for the entirety of the season, this has been a top 35 team at home with regards to their defensive efficiency, points allowed on a per possession basis. Boy, has that went down the toilet bowl recently. They are currently playing no defense whatsoever, but their offense has been very good. So if you look since the turn of the calendar, I'm sure they're well outside the top 150 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. As the last time they gave up fewer than 80 points, you have to go all the way back to that Michigan game on Tuesday the 13th of February, and that is the only out of their last, I believe now, 10 games in which they have given up fewer than 75 points. So, I mean, it really has been some ghastly defense here from Illinois. Meanwhile, you've got a Purdue team that has been able to step it up a little bit more with regards to their defense, so they themselves have given up 74 plus in now 3 out of their last 5 games, but I do think that Purdue going to be able to do a little bit of a better job in this ordeal. You've got Braden Smith, who's able to give you 7 assists, 6 boards, 13 points per game, shoots about 44% from 3, and for this Purdue team, among their top 8 scorers, all but one of them shoot at least 40% from 3-point range. Lance Jones is the exception, as he's been able to log about 12.5 points per game. And what I like about this Purdue team is that they don't hurt themselves. They only turn the ball over about 11.5 times per contest. This is a top 10 team in all of college basketball in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Now, they do face off against an Illinois team that, if you look for the season, they allow opponents to shoot 31.5% from 3-point range at home. That recently has been much, much worse, and I think that you don't want to be looking too much at Illinois' overall season numbers. But for Purdue, they allow opponents to shoot 32.5% from 3. They've been able to do a relatively solid job there. You got Marcus Domask on the flip side for Illinois, supplying north of 14 points per contest, truly being a stat sheet sufferer, but at the same time, he's not a guy that's really going to light it up from 3-point range. You do have Terrence Shannon, who's giving you north of 22 points. He has shot it well from 3-point range, but I do think that Purdue probably going to be looking to slow it down just a little bit more in this game. They are playing much faster than they did a season ago. Last year, they were one of the slowest teams in all of college basketball. This season for Purdue, they have stepped it up to being, in terms of total possessions per game, about 154th, but I do think that for Purdue, they're going to be able to do a nice job with their defense being able to travel, with having guys like Fletcher, Lawyer, and company in the backcourt being just so dominant, and I do think that for Illinois, we are going to start to see the offense take a little bit of a fall off, and I think that Brandon Underwood is going to get it through the skull of his guys that they need to start playing a little bit more defense, and they do a nice job on the glass, with out of their top 6 scorers, 5 of them being able to supply at least 5 rebounds. So I just said Illinois is a 1-point favorite, but here at the 2, that is my buy point on Purdue, and I did set my total at a 161. I do think that both of these teams going to look to step it up a little bit more on defense. I'm looking at the under and the deuce here with Purdue. 619, 620 on the betting board. Providence hits a road face-off against Georgetown. Georgetown is a underdog of 7.5 to 8.5 points. So last game is 149, and with Georgetown, I did set them as a underdog of 8.5 points. So I'm going to be willing to lay the 7.5 here with Providence. This open up at 7, so it is starting to steam up, and you can see why. With Georgetown, they're outside the top 300 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. And for Georgetown, well, you do have Supreme Cook down low, who's been tremendous with his rebounding, about 8.5 boards, north of 10 points per contest. He's like the only guy for this Georgetown team that has given you any sort of an effort on the glass. Nobody else other than Dontrez Styles gives you north of 3.3 rebounds per game. And for Styles, he does give you 13 points, shoots 37.5% from 3-point range, but it's very hard to offset being outside the top 300 with regards to points allowed on a per possession basis when your offense is what it is for Georgetown. Georgetown about 193rd in the country in terms of points scored per possession. Now, they do average about 9.6 points more per 100 possessions at home rather than in a road/neutral court environment, and they do take on a Providence team that has been seeing a drop-off of about 9.6 points fewer per 100 possessions when they leave home. And keep in mind, this is a big Ed Cooley battle as well, so that makes things all the more intriguing. But But with Bryce Hopkins out of the fold, you've got Devin Carter has been able to stuff the stat sheet, 19 points, 8 boards, 3.5 assists, C.O.N.A. per contest, shoots 39% from three-point range, has been simply tremendous there. And then you've got Josh Oduro, who's now shooting about 31% from three. He piles in there about 7 rebounds per game. This Georgetown team, I think, is going to get lit up on the glass, and even though it's not like this Providence team is like some sort of a top 20 rebound rate team or anything like that, they should be able to take that battle relatively easily at about 150th in all of college basketball. With regards to rebound rate, Providence's big issue has been the turnovers with about 12.5 per contest, but taking gains has been able to do a nice job, being able to give you about 9 points to help out in the backcourt as well. I do think that Providence going to be able to go out there, dominate this game, as the offense has been much better for them. They've been able to get past the 75-point plateau in 3 of their last 5 games. Meanwhile, you've got a Georgetown team that's just getting absolutely destroyed on defense. They have given up north of 75 points in each of their last 4 games, and for this Georgetown unit, the last time they gave up fewer than 70 points in a contest, you have to go all the way back to January. When they played against DePaul, that was a 68-65 slog. So I do think that you're going to be able to get quite a few points up on the board in this one. I do think that Providence is going to be able to take this game and run with it. I'm willing to lay up to 8 with Providence, and did set my total more around a 148.5. We're getting up to a 149. This is coming down from a 151. So still a little bit of runway for the under. Providence still a top 40 team with regards to points allowed on a per possession basis, and I do think that they're going to be able to get their 70-75. I just don't think that Georgetown does their part with this total. So looking at the under, and I'm going to be willing to lay it with Providence. 621-622 on the betting board. Ole Miss hits the road face-off against Georgia. Georgia is a 2 to a 2.5 point favorite, and your total on this game is 149. With Georgia, I did set them as a favorite in this spot of 4 points. I'm going to be willing to lay it with Ole Miss. This defense has just not been tremendous, to say the least. With Ole Miss, they are also a team that's about 150th in the country in terms of rebound rate, and that's where you do want to be attacking this Georgia team. Georgia has Russell Shaywood down low, who's been able to give you 7+ rebounds per game, but with Georgia, they're about 249th in the country with their rebound rate, and that not being overly exposed in this game, I think is going to be very big for them, because they've got a pair of guys in the backcourt in Jabri Abdul-Rahim, coupled with Noah Thomason, who are able to combine for about 25 points per game. You've got on the flip side a unit that has just been very, very much a struggling out there in SEC play, as you just have not been able to get a lot out of this Ole Miss team from anything other than 3-point range. For Ole Miss, they do shoot as a collective about 37.5% from distance, and for Ole Miss, among their players that have hit at least 1 3 thus far this season, their top 5 scorers, you've got all but one of them shooting at least 36.5% from 3-point range, but they do face off against a Georgia unit that, while they have been far from tremendous with regards to their 3-point shooting defense, they've been pretty solid at home, allowing opponents to shoot about 32.1% from 3-point range at home. That balloons up to 35% when they're away from home, while Ole Miss, they do allow opponents to shoot about 36% from distance in a road or neutral court environment. You do have Musa Cisse, along with Jamarian Sharp down low, been able to combine for about 4 blocks per contest, but again, they're not giving you a lot of rebounding. As a matter of fact, the only guy that gives you north of 5 rebounds per game is Sam Flanagan, with about 6.5 boards, 15.5 points per game. For Georgia, it has been an all-over-the-place sort of season for them. They have been held down recently with their offense scoring fewer than 70 points at each of their last 2 games, while the defense has been touch and go, to say the least. But you've also got an Ole Miss team that has now been just really giving it up on defense as well, giving up at least 76 points in 4 of their last 5 games. Other than their wins against Missouri, they have not achieved a win in, I believe, now a month. The last time they beat a team that wasn't named Missouri, you have to go all the way back to January. So I do think that this is a little bit of a rough spot for Ole Miss, and I do think that with Georgia not being exposed on the glass, they're going to be able to find a way to be able to get it done. Set my line at 4. I'm going to be willing to lay it with Georgia, and I did set my total at a 148. So circumstance where I'm going to be taking a look at this 149 under, and I'm going to be willing to lay it with the Old Doga. 623, 624 on the betting board. Ohio hits the road face off against Buffalo. Buffalo is a 10 to an 11 point underdog. Your total is 150.5. Made my line 11. Let's open up at 10. You're at the 10.5. It's the max I'm willing to lay, but I'm going to be willing to lay it with the Ohio Bobcats. They're doing a much better job defensively right now. They still are for the season, well outside the top 175 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, but you're getting a much better effort out of a team that has now given up fewer than 68 points in each of their last 4 games, going up against a Buffalo team that has been a bottom 30 unit in terms of points scored on a per possession basis all season. Now, Buffalo comes in relatively warm with their offense. They have scored at least 72 points throughout their last 4 games, but they're dealing with an injury to one of their main guards, and Anquan Bolden Jr. has been able to shoot it relatively well from 3-point range. Tried to return in that game against Kent State, could only get out there for a few minutes. For Buffalo, really their bread and butter is down low with Janavius Smith alongside Chapman, being able to combine for about 15 rebounds per game, but even with that, they're still outside the top 250 with regards to their rebound rate. They turn the ball over 14.5 times per contest while shooting 27.1% from 3-point range, going up against an Ohio unit that has a nice duo in Sharif Mitchell along Jalen Hunter, who have been able to combine for about 27 points per game, and these guys really don't shoot it well from three, but it's the ancillary pieces that do, which is why Ohio is shooting about its collective 35.8% from three, and they do a really nice job of just keeping things clean. Ohio, a top 30 team in all of college basketball, the guards fewest turnovers on a per possession basis with 9.8 per contest, and it's all about what you're able to get out of Miles Brown along with AJ Clayton when it comes to the outside. These two guys, they've been able to combine for about 21.5 points per contest, both shoot north of 40% from 3-point range for an Ohio team that, if they do have a liability, they're not great down low. They don't have a single guy in the roster that gives you north of 5 rebounds per game. In terms of their rebound rate, they're only about 262nd in all of college basketball, but have a Buffalo team that just has not been able to do a great job, even with Cy Chapman, giving you 18 plus points per contest, north of 6 rebounds per game. In Ohio, even though they have been rough with regards to their defense throughout much of the season, the 3-point shooting defense has come along for the ride. They're about 163rd in all of college basketball. Buffalo, well outside the top 275 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and 319th in opponent 3-point shooting percentage. So, circumstance where with Ohio, I did set them as an 11-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay this number, and with the total, I did set my total at a 147 because, simply put, even though Buffalo has been a little bit better recently with regards to their offense, I just don't think that they're going to hold up their end of the bargain with the way that Ohio has been locking teams down recently. So I'm going to be looking at the under, set my total 147 and willing to lay up to 10.5 with Ohio. 625, 626 on the betting board. Clemson plays host to Syracuse, and Syracuse is an underdog of 9.5 points. Total on this game is 153 to 153.5. I set Clemson as a 9.5 point favorite. This was an opener in quite a few places at a 9, and at a 9 I would be willing to lay it. As of right now, this is going to be a little bit more of a wait and see. If we can continue to get this up to like a 10, something like that, it'll be a take for me on Syracuse. Get back down to 9 or less, I'm going to be willing to lay it with Clemson. Looking like more likely than not, we're going to be probably laying like an 8.5 to a 9 here with Clemson, with the Tigers being able to have some very good rebounding in this game. Ian Shefflin along with PJ Hall combining for about 16.5 rebounds per game for a Clemson bunch that, in terms of rebound rate, they are a top 40 team in all of college basketball, and for Syracuse, they are well outside the top 225 with this regard. Syracuse has been able to have Malik Brown down low, give you 7 rebounds, and for Syracuse, you do have a pair of guys in the backcourt in Judah Mintz along J.J. Serlin. They're combining for about 32.5 points per contest, but for Syracuse, just don't have a lot from the outside, really on offense or on defense. They shoot 33.5% from 3-point range on offense, and on defense, they are 217th in the country with regards to opponents' 3-point shooting percentage, actually guarding the arc a little bit better when they're away from home. And the Syracuse team is completely reliant upon being able to generate turnovers. As Brown, who I mentioned before, along Judah Mintz, they both give you 2.2 steals per game, and Syracuse is a top 35 team in the country in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, but now they have to go up against a Clemson team that has been one of the best at being able to take care of the ball in the country. Have a pair of guys in the backcourt, and Joe Girard along Chase Hunter, that combined for 28 points per game, while Hunter has not shot it too well from 3-point range. He's starting to heat up, shooting 33% for the season. Girard, he's been out all season long, shoots 42.5% from 3-point range, and Syracuse, with their willingness to try to generate turnovers, that does lead to them putting quite a few teams on the free throw line, and for Clemson, this has been a team that's been pretty good at the charity stripe as well, shooting north of 78% at the line. Each of their top 3 scorers shoot at least 79% at the free throw line, and they've been able to get a little bit of a boost as well on defense with Jack Clark coming in, being able to slide the team with about 5 rebounds per game. I do think that Clemson is going to be able to control things down low, and for Syracuse, they've been looking better recently with 4 straight wins. It's come against a lot of lesser competition. They've still given up north of 70 points in all of those games. Meanwhile, you've got a Clemson team that now has given up fewer than 70 points each of their last 4 games. I do think that Clemson is going to be able to hunker down a little bit more with regards to their defense. I do think that they protect the ball to not allow Syracuse to get into their style, so I did set my total 147.5. I'm looking at the under. And Clemson made them a 9.5 point favorite, and a 9 or less going to be willing to lay with Clemson. If we, for some reason, get up to a 10 plus, we'll be willing to take the points with Syracuse. 627, 628 on the betting board. Louisville is going to be playing us to Virginia Tech. Virginia Tech is a favorite of 7.5 to 8 points, and your total on this game, it is 152. Opener on this game was 6. Still willing to lay the 7.5 as of right now. I set my line at 8 personally. I took this a little bit more towards the opening number, but still see a little bit of runway here if you've got a 7.5, and I think the money is moving in the correct direction. As for Louisville, the team has just been awful. You do have a trio of guys, Mikey James, Trey White along Sky Clark will all give you 13 points per game, but for Louisville, they're outside the top 300 in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. This Waldy offense has been incredibly inefficient as they are turning the ball over about 12.7 times per contest. Louisville, in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, just 240th in all of college basketball. They're not great at generating second chances other than Brendan Hundley Hatfield and his 9 to 9.5 rebounds per game. Just don't have much there. Meanwhile, for Virginia Tech, yes, this is a unit that they do take a big drop off when they're on the road rather than at home. For Virginia Tech, 73rd in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, scoring about 18.8 points fewer per 100 possessions when they leave home, but I don't think it's as much of a threat against a Louisville team that they're just not getting too much from their home crowd right now because the Louisville program has been so stinky that they're not getting the same support that they used to, and I don't blame the fans whatsoever. This is unacceptable. You've got Lynn Kidd, who's been able to do a solid job down low for Virginia Tech. He's able to give you about 6.5 rebounds per game, and typically Virginia Tech in the ACC has been getting just plowed on the glass, but in this case, with Louisville being outside the top 200 with regards to rebound rate, Virginia Tech, them checking in about 179th, they should be able to do a solid job there, and for Sean Padula, the turnovers have been a little bit unsightly, 3.3 per contest, but still gives you 16 points, 4.5 boards, 4.5 assists, shoots in the mid-30s from three-point range, and now they get to go up against a Louisville team that has been certainly giving it up from three-point range. Louisville, 342nd in all of college basketball. In terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage, Virginia Tech leaves a little bit of something to be desired here at 212th in all of college basketball, but still, they are a team that has, even with their struggles, been much better than Louisville all season long. I did set my line at 8. I am going to be willing to lay up to 7.5 with Virginia Tech, and I did set my total at 150. I just flat out think that Louisville not quite could be able to do their part with this total, though I do think that they still give it up against a Virginia Tech team that still is not very up-tempo, well outside the top 200 with regards to total possessions per game. So looking at the under, and I'm going to be willing to lay up to 7.5 here with Virginia Tech. 629, 630 on the betting board. Dartmouth plays us Harvard. Harvard is a 6.5 point favorite, and your total on this game is there between 135 to 135.5 with Dartmouth. I set them as a 7.5 point underdog. I'm going to be willing to lay the 6 to 6.5 here with Harvard, and with Harvard, it's been just really a lot of injuries that have been robbing this team. I know that Malik Mack was dealing with some mono. They had Justice Ajabar be out of the fold for quite some time. I know that Chisa Mopara has missed a game or two, so it has been trials and tribulations there. But for Harvard, there's still a bunch of, they only turn the ball over about 12 times per contest. They have been having their ups and downs from distance. Malik Mack now shooting just 35% from three-point range, and this has been a Harvard team that hasn't been the same shooting team when they've been away from home rather than when they have been at home. Harvard checking in right around about 200th in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, and they do take a drop off of about 7 points per 100 possessions when they leave home rather than when they are at home, but they get to face off against the Dartmouth team as 356th in all of college basketball in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, and it's not even like they get too much of a boost from being at home. At home, they're averaging about 91.3 points per 100 possessions. That ranks 357th in all of college basketball. Dartmouth has been able to get some good production out of Dusan Niskovic, who's supplied the team with 15.5 points, shoots 35.5% from three-point range, and is able to chip in there about 4 boards per contest as well, but past that, you just don't have much with this team. Ryan Cornish last year was a double-figure scorer. He's been out of the fold for half the season. Brandon Mitchell-Day gives you 6 rebounds. He's the only guy in the roster that gives you north of 5 rebounds per game, and with having Asia Power back in the fold, who's able to give you north of 2 blocks per game, this Dartmouth team is going to get absolutely romped on the glass. Dartmouth, with regards to the rebound rate, 290th in all of college basketball. Harvard leaves something to be desired as well as 271st, and you do have a Dartmouth team that, to their credit, they've played a lot of unders because they haven't been the worst perimeter defense when they've been at home. Dartmouth at home allows opponents to shoot 30.9% from 3, a relatively good number. That does go to 42.2% in a road or neutral court environment. Meanwhile, Harvard, they actually allow opponents to shoot just 32.5% from 3-point range away from home. That is up to right around 35% when they're at home, and Harvard doesn't really have too big of home and road splits with regards to their defense. They're only allowing about 3 points more per 100 possessions when they leave home. The Dartmouth team has been slow. They've been just unable to generate a lot of offense in general. I do think that Harvard is going to be able to take it to them in the spot. I do think that the Dartmouth defense does an okay job of keeping them in it, but for Dartmouth only shooting about 30% from 3, turn the ball over 13 times per contest with a low tempo style, and Dartmouth not being able to get past the 60-point plateau in 2 of their last 3 games, not encouraging to say the least against a Harvard team that as well has been having some offensive issues. They have failed to get past 70 in 3 out of their last 4 games. So I do think that this is another low-scoring slog. Semi-total 131F, diving under, and with Harvard, I'm willing to lay up to 7 with them. 631, 632 on the betting board. Central Michigan, it's a road face-off against Northern Illinois. Northern Illinois is a underdog of 1.5 to 2 points, and your total as 137. I said Northern Illinois as a 1.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to take them outright on the money line. For Central Michigan, this is by far the better defense in this ordeal, but they just haven't been able to get anything on offense from this bunch. As Central Michigan allows opponents to shoot only 31.6% from three-point range overall. This does balloon up to about 33.6% when they're away from home, but defense has honestly been fine. They've been a top 225 team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. This despite them not necessarily being a great team on the glass. Brian Taylor is able to give you about 7 rebounds per game, but Central Michigan outside the top 225 with regards to rebound rate. Got a Northern Illinois team as outside the top 300 as well, but I do like what they get out of Yannick Konen-Niederhauser, the 6'11" big man who's been able to supply the team with 2 blocks per contest. The overall rebounding has been taking a little bit of a drop off, but also for Northern Illinois, they've got the top overall scorer in this game, David Coit, 20.5 points, about 3.2 boards, 3.5 assists per contest, shooting about 34% from 3 points for a Northern Illinois team that they look to play up tempo, but they are now well outside the top 275 themselves in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. So with Northern Illinois, the offense has really come and gone all season long, but now they have been able to get past the 70-point plateau in each of their last 2 games, being able to hang in there against Akron to the count of 80-73. I think is encouraging, and for the Central Michigan team, the defense has been the strong suit for them all season long, starting to crumble a little bit. They've given up 79-plus points each of their last 3 games. Anthony Pritchard is very versatile, 4.5 assists, 5 boards, 13.5 points per contest. Absolutely love what he's able to bring to the table for this team, but that said, who else is going to be able to give this team a little bit of just a spark? With Derek Butler being able to supply the team with 10 points, does shoot about 40% from 3-point range, and then you've got Aiden Rubio, who's been able to supply 7 points, shoots about 41% from distance as well, but I mean, he's had 3 points or fewer now 3 out of the last 4 games. It has been a case where they just haven't been able to find a lot outside of Taylor to be able to hit the glass down low as well. So I do think that Northern Illinois, for all their deficiencies, they do find a way to get it done in a game where I do think that Central Michigan is going to be able to step up a little bit with their defense, but just with the way that Northern Illinois plays super duper up tempo and the way that I think that this is going to be nip and tuck with late game fouling, I do think that you're going to be able to get an over in this spot. And by the way, for Northern Illinois, about 108th in all of college basketball with regards to total possessions per game. So circumstance where I did set my total at a 139.5. I'm looking over, and with Northern Illinois, made them the 1.5 point favorite. Going to be looking at them outright on the money line. 633, 634 on the betting board. Cincinnati, yes, we are on to Cincinnati. Bill Belichick. They're on the road. They're facing off against Oklahoma. And Oklahoma is a 5.5 to a 6 point favorite with your total 138.5. I did set Cincinnati as an underdog of 2.5 points. So I'm going to be willing to take those points. Cincinnati is going to be able to win the battle on the glass. They're a top 25 team in terms of rebound right now. To the credit of Oklahoma, they're in the top 40 with this respect as well. But they just don't have guys to be able to match up with Aziz Bandango, who's been able to do absolutely amazing work down low for Cincinnati. He, along with Victor Lakeen, are combining for about 14.5 rebounds per game, while Oklahoma really only has 1 player on the roster that's been able to give you north of 5.2 rebounds per game. That'd be Jalen Moore, who's been able to give you more. 10.5 points, 6.5 boards, shoots 41.5% from 3. And for Oklahoma, the biggest thing that they do have going for them is that they play significantly better at home rather than when they are on the road. For Oklahoma, in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, they're averaging well more than 10 points more per 100 possessions at home rather than in a road/neutral venue, and they do also log nearly 12 to 13 points fewer per 100 possessions rendered when they're at home rather than away from home. And you've got Javion McCollum along with Ortega away. They've been able to combine for about 25 points, and away is able to shoot 40% from 3, but we've just seen it with this Oklahoma team. In conference, they're hardly shooting above 30% from 3-point range. It's been a big giant fall off there. Now, to the credit of Oklahoma, the 3-point shooting defense has remained a constant. Oklahoma, in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage, they continue to be a top 25 team in all of college basketball, doing a nice job being able to lock it down on that front, especially at home with opponents shooting just 30.3% from 3-point range. Meanwhile, it is a Cincinnati team in which they're just not quite the same team when they're away from home, as they do allow opponents to shoot 36% from 3-point range on the road, but you do have a guy in Dan Skillings who's been able to give you 12 points per contest. You've been able to get a little bit of production out of Giselle James, who's been, in my opinion, a little bit disappointing, but still gives you 7.5 points, shoots in the mid-30s from 3-point range for a Cincinnati team that does need to clean up the 12.5 turnovers per contest. But I do think that the overall just toughness and the way that Cincinnati goes about defense is going to be able to help them hold in this game. It's been rough for the Cincinnati offense as they have scored fewer than 60 points in 2 out of their last 3 games, but they've also got an Oklahoma team that sans that nutty overtime overtime game that we saw against Oklahoma State, they have just not been able to bust through as well. Outside of that game, they have now scored 66 points or fewer in all but one out of their last 6 games. So I do think that this is going to be a bit more of a low-scoring slog. I did set my total at a 140.5, banking on a little bit of late game felling to be able to help us out a little bit late. And this is a Cincinnati team that they themselves have now acted up with regards to their defense, giving up 72 plus in 4 of their last 5 games. They're playing a little bit more up-tempo, and I do think that for Oklahoma, just the way that they play much better with their regards to their offense at home rather than on the road, that's going to be able to help them out with regards to the total. But I do think that Cincinnati going to be able to hold in there. Set my line at 2.5. I'm going to be taking the points with Cincinnati and set my total at a 140.5. Also in on the total over 635, 636 on the bang board. Oklahoma State, they play us at Texas Tech. Texas Tech is a favorite of 2.5 points, and your total going to be getting it between 146.5 and 147 with Oklahoma State. I did set them as an underdog of 2.5 points, so would need to get down to a 2 or less to be able to lay it with Texas Tech. With Texas Tech, this has been much more of an offense-oriented team, which I was not expecting out of Grant McCasland. This has been a squad that has shot north of 37% from three-point range. And by the way, we did see this number at 2 a little bit before, so if we can get back to 2, I'd be willing to lay it. But getting back to Texas Tech, this team as a collective, they're shooting 36.5% from three-point range, with Davion Williams just being a stat sheet suffer 11.7 boards, 2.5 assists, shooting nearly 46% from three-point range, while Chase McMillan, he's been able to shoot about 39% from the outside. Kerwin Walton, he continues to shoot nearly 49% from 3, has been a little bit more of a situational player, but one thing that Texas Tech does leave to be desired is the rebounding. I thought that they would be a little bit better on this front in terms of their rebound rate, despite having Warren Williams, a true 7-footer, giving you about 7 boards per contest. They're only about 161st, and for Oklahoma State, they're very much diminished on the glass. They're about 181st in the country with this regard, but that'll allow them to be able to hold in this game, as you've got someone in Keon Williams who's delivered nice versatility. He leads the team with 5.7 rebounds per game while being able to shell out a steal. Shoots it from 3, but only shoots it at about 30% clip. But I do think that the most impactful player in this game might be Javon Small, as he does it all for Oklahoma State. 4.5 assists, 5 boards, 14.5 points, shooting 37% from three-point range, and they've needed him with Bryce Thompson being out the fold since the beginning of the month of February. You've had the Daily Show and Mr. Eric Daly Jr. be able to supply the team with about 9 points per contest. I know that he's been dealing with a little bit of injury and just general foul trouble in the last few games as well. But for Oklahoma State, they're now shooting about 34% from 3. Offensive efficiency, they're well outside the top 175 with that regard. But this is a Texas Tech team that is outside the top 85 with regards to their points allowed on a per possession basis. And with them giving up nearly 13 points more per 100 possessions away from home rather than at home, and this being a Texas Tech unit that has been getting gashed from three-point range when they've been away from home, allowing teams from distance to be able to shoot it at a clip of about 38.6%. I do think that Oklahoma State does a nice job of being able to hold in there at a 2 or less. Going to be willing to lay with Texas Tech 3 or more. That is my buy plan on Oklahoma State, and I did sell my total 146F. This has been a Texas Tech team that, despite the fact that they don't play with a lot of possessions in their game, they're well outside the top 225 in terms of total possessions per game. They've been having some explosive games. Do think that this total is a little bit too high with the way that Oklahoma State does turn the ball over, so at a 147 or higher, looking at the under, and with Texas Tech willing to lay up to 2 with them, 3 or more. That is my buy plan on Oklahoma State. 637, 638 on the big board. Wyoming plays us Air Force. Air Force is a underdog of 6.5 to 7 points. Total on this game is 136.5 to 137. Made my total 139.5. I'm going to be looking at the over. These are two teams with very weird home and road splits. For Air Force, they're giving up fewer points per possession when they're away from home rather than when they are at home. For Air Force, they're giving up about 2.6 points fewer per 100 possessions in a roadside score environment and are 328th overall in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Wyoming not doing a whole heck of a lot better, as they're 322nd in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, giving up 3.2 points more per 100 possessions when they're at home rather than away from home. Now, Wyoming is a much better offense when they're at home, averaging north of 12 points more per 100 possessions at home rather than in a road or neutral court environment. And this Wyoming team can really shoot it from three-point range. You've got a pair of guys that are shooting north of 36% from three-point range that have been able to combine for about 30.5 points per contest, and Sam Griffin along with a cool cut. Overall, Wyoming shooting 36% from three-point range, going up against an Air Force unit that it has been, not so forceful in terms of being able to get out there and be able to force teams to be able to hit tough threes. They're 337th in all of college basketball with regards to opponents' three-point shooting percentage. That said, this is a Wyoming team that they give up a lot of of open looks as well. At home, they're allowing opponents to shoot 37.7% from three-point range, and for Air Force, they really don't have a lot of rebounding with this team. They're outside the top 250 with regards to their rebound rate. Wyoming, you've been able to get about 7.5 rebounds per game out of Cam Maine. I mean, it's been a Wyoming team that has been outside the top 225 with regards to rebound rate. They're a little bit better there, but for Air Force, I do like their big three, as they've got Ethan Taylor, Bo Becker, Ryan Petraeus, combining for in that neighborhood about 44.5 points per contest. Between the three of them, they do shoot 37% from three. In Air Force, as a collective, they're shooting north of 36% from three-point range. The offense has legitimately not been bad for Air Force, and again, they're averaging more points per possession away from home rather than at home. It's about 5 points more per 100 possessions when they're away from home rather than at home. Again, I don't know what to make out of it. They had that big giant 30-point win when they played against UNLV about a month and a half ago. They're shooting 38% from three-point range when they're away from home, but they really don't have a lot down low. You've been able to have Kellen Boylan be able to give you about 2 assists. He's chipping in there about 5 or so rebounds per game, but I do think that Air Force, with the way that they play on the road, they're going to be able to hold in there in a game where both of these teams, they're not super up-tempo, but both of these defenses have been absolutely awful all season long. So I did set my total at 139.5. I'm willing to take a look at the over at the Air Force. I did set them as an underdog 5.5 points, so taking the points and the over. 639, 640 on the betting board. St. Louis, they play also Dayton. Dayton is a favorite of between 8.5 and 9 points. Your total on this game is 152.5. This has come down from the opener of 10.5. Now that we've gotten down to 8.5 to 9, I am going to be willing to lay it. St. Louis has been playing some better basketball recently, but they're still well outside the top 275 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. You can't take the metrics just completely at face value with St. Louis because they have dealt with quite a few injuries. Sincere Parker being out the fold for 13 games hurt them. Bradley Iwaziro missed a double-figure amount of games. Tim Dolger has been in and out of the fold, and he's going to be out for this one as well, but with St. Louis, they've been able to right the ship a little bit more with their three-point shooting. They shoot about 37.5% from the outside. That's a top 30 mark in all of college basketball. Problem is, it doesn't quite compare to Dayton. Now, Dayton does take a little bit of a drop-off with regards to their outside shooting when they're away from home, but the Dayton team for the season, 6th in the country in terms of three-point shooting percentage, shooting 41.1% from the outside when they're at home. In a road or neutral court environment, they're shooting more like 37.7% from three-point range. And you get to go up against the St. Louis team that's just not been able to guard to save their lives. They've got Gibson Jimerson, who's a nice scorer, so able to give you about 14 points, shoots the 930s from three-point range, but in terms of actually being able to guard the arc, you just have not been able to get much of that whatsoever going up against a Dayton team that as well should be able to own the glass. St. Louis well outside the top 225 in terms of rebound rate. Dayton, you've got Nate Santos, Dayron Holmes, who combined for about 14.5 rebounds per game. Santos shoots 41% from three with 12 points per contest. Holmes, well, he's been able to get it. Holmes with 20 points, shooting 38% from three-point range, and for the Satan bunch, each of their top 4 scorers, they all shoot at least 35.9% from three-point range, and other than Holmes, out of your top 5 scorers, all of them shoot at least 75% at the free throw line as well. Dayton is also a top 55 team in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis, so they've been able to keep their possessions relatively clean as well, and for Dayton being able to have Kobe Elvis along Kobe Brea doing a nice job combining for about 19.5 points, Elvis being able to give you 3.5 assists per contest, while Brea shoots 49% from three-point range. I think that they're going to take it out of a St. Louis team that, even though they've been much more successful with their offense recently, last time this team gave up fewer than 80 points in a game, you have to go all the way back to February 3rd against Fordham. They have been getting absolutely cooked with that regard. Now, I did set my total at a 146. Dayton is a bottom 40 team with regards to total possessions per game. They're really playing super duper slow, and I do think that Dayton has a chance to be able to get to 80 here, but I do think that a defense that has been a little bit leaky for Dayton recently, I do think that it's going to be able to rise up here. Dayton is outside the top 75 with regards to points allowed on a per possession basis, but 41st in the country in opponent's three-point shooting percentage, so one to lay it here with Dayton, and I'm going to be taking a look at the under. 641, 642 on the main board. DePaul plays host to St. John's. St. John's is a 19 to a 19.5 point favorite, and your total on this game is 152. Opener on this game was 17, and with St. John's, I did make them a favorite of 16 points. I'm going to be willing to take these points. With St. John's, they are a bunch that they give up in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, north of 16 points more per 100 possessions away from home rather than at home, and I mean, this DePaul team is stinky. I wish I could put it any other way, but this DePaul team, it is bad. They are 349th in the country in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage, outside the top 275 with regards to rebound rate. They are outside the top 275 in terms of both points scored and points allowed on a per possession basis. You can run down the list, but at the very least, they've got Chico Carter back in the fold, a double-figure score to help out a unit that does not have a single player on the roster that's currently averaging north of 4.5 rebounds per game, and you do have the versatility of Deshaun Nelson. He's been able to do a nice job, be able to log for this team right around about 10 or so points. He chips in there 4 boards, shoots about 32% from 3-point range. But for St. John's, you do have to fear that the just ineptitude on defense is going to be catching up to them a little bit. And this is not an amazing St. John's team in terms of athleticism, outside shooting, or anything like that. They shoot about 33% from 3-point range, which is okay. It's not necessarily great. Now, DePaul, they just haven't been able to get too much of a boost from their home crowd. And can you really blame anyone for not wanting to go to a DePaul game? Because I certainly cannot. But with St. John's in a just lifeless atmosphere like this, you have to wonder how much they're going to be up for this as well. And for St. John's, you do have a good facilitator in Dennis Jenkins, who's giving you about 14.5 points, 5.5 assists, but not a lot of creators outside of him. You've been able to get 9.5 rebounds, a double-figure amount of points out of Joel Soriano, but he's been a little bit touch and go all season long. RJ Louise, he spent a little bit of time out due to injury, and he's sort of been in and out of the fold recently as well, and has been very inconsistent when he has been playing as well. So I do think that this is a number that's a little bit overinflated for DePaul. At the very least, they did give you a relatively good effort when they were in a competitive game against Georgetown a few weeks ago. It is a bunch that has certainly been given up recently, at least 77 points to render each of their last 5 games. And you do have a St. John's team that's not allowed fewer than 70 points in 3 of their last 4 games, but I do think that we've gone just a little bit too far here. I set my line at a 16. I'm going to be willing to take those points, and did set my total 150. St. John's has not quite been the same offense as well when they've been away from home, and this is a DePaul team that I think that they're going to do everything humanly possible to try to, at the very least, be competitive in one of these games. I'm going to be willing to take the points, and I'm going to be taking a look at this total under 643, 644 on the betting board. You've got Missouri playing against Auburn. Auburn is a 11 to an 11.5 point road favorite. Your total is between 148.5 and 149.5. Set Auburn as an 11.5 point favorite. I'm willing to lay the 11. With Auburn, this team ranks in the top 45 in terms of both points scored and points allowed on a per possession basis. This has been one of the better perimeter defenses in all of college basketball as well, allowing opponents to shoot from 3-point range only 30.5%. That's 31.3% away from home, so it travels relatively well. And for Auburn, they're turning the ball over less than 11 times per contest. I really like what I'm seeing there, even with Aiden Holloway not necessarily giving you a ton of production. You still have G&I Broom doing a nice job cleaning up with 16.5 points, 8.5 rebounds per game. Trey Donaldson is able to dole it out. And for Missouri, this team really is reliant upon Tamar Bates along Sean East, popping it from 3-point range. They combine for about 31 points per contest. East is shooting 46.5% from 3. Bates is shooting 38.5% from distance for a Missouri team that is only averaging right around 32.3% with their 3-point shooting, because everyone else on the team has been awful aside from Nick Honor and for Missouri. They just have not been able to guard a soul all season long. 291st in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Now, good news for them is that they do give up 12 points fewer per 100 possessions at home rather than in a road or neutral court venue. And this is an Auburn team that just throughout the last few years, they have had some pretty demonstrative home and road splits. They are giving up 10 points more per 100 possessions when they leave home, but this is still a very well-balanced unit that has Jalen Williams, who's able to do a nice job popping it from 3-point range, giving you about 5 or so rebounds per game, going against the Missouri team as well outside the top 200 in terms of their rebound rate. Just have no idea why Connor Vanover hasn't gotten more minutes. He's a 7'3" gentleman that's giving you 2.7 rebounds per game. You don't have a single guy on the roster that's currently averaging north of 5 rebounds per game. They've needed something, and that just has not been there. I have no idea what's happening with Missouri right now, but they're on a 16-game losing streak. And I mean, to their credit, they've actually gotten to at least 73 points in 4 of their last 5 games. They're just getting cooked on defense going up against an Auburn unit that has been able to get cooking with their offense. They have gotten to at least 78 points in 4 of their last 5 games. So an interesting circumstance here. I did set my total at a 147.5. I do think that Auburn is going to be able to do a relatively solid job with regards to their defense, and I do think that Missouri is going to get it through their skulls that they do need to play a little bit more defense as well in Auburn. They're not necessarily the most amazing outside shooting team as well. For Auburn, they're shooting from 3-point range about 34.7% from distance, so going to be willing to take a look at the under. Now with Auburn, I'm willing to lay up to 11 with them. Now we have my DK and our Garida pick. 645, 646 on the card. It is Florida playing against Alabama. Alabama is an underdog of anywhere between 1 to 1.5 points. This was an opener with Alabama being a 1-point favorite, and tonight's game between 176.5 to as high as a 177.5. I'm going to take the plunge here on the under. I am a sick human being. I am not a conventional man, but set my total at a 171. I just take a look at this, and if you had 75 possessions in this game and every one of them was a three-pointer, you would need these teams to hit a combined 39.3% from three to be able to hit the over. That's with no turnovers or anything like that. And if you take a look at this Florida perimeter defense, it's honestly one of the best in all of college basketball when they're at home. When they're away from home, it's night and day. Now, with Florida, they allow opponents to shoot 27.9% from three-point range at home. That is 14th in all of college basketball. And for Florida, they do get a very nice boost from being at home. They allow 13.1 points fewer per 100 possessions at home rather than in a road/neutral court environment. And you do have an Alabama team that has been rough with their defense. They are about 228th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. They're giving up well more than 13 points more per 100 possessions away from home rather than when they are at home. But this Alabama team, they allow you to shoot just 32% from three-point range as well. And it's not like this Florida team is some amazing shooting team. They're a top 30 team in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, but it's not because of their three-point shooting. They shoot as collective about 34% from distance, as outside the top 170 nationally. You do have a pair of guys in Walter Clayton alongside Pullen, who have been pulling in the buckets with about 32 points per contest. Pullen, your main facilitator, 5 assists, shoots 43.5% from three-point range, but outside of he and Walter Clayton, you really don't have anyone that shoots a significant amount of threes that's shooting above 33% from distance. They've really been doing it down low. You've got a trio, Micah Hanglon, Therese Samuels, along with Alex Condon, who have done a nice job combining for about 21.5 rebounds per game, as Florida's actually number 3 in all of college basketball with regards to offensive rebound rate. They rebound north of 38% of their misses, but also now faces an Alabama team that is a top 75 team in terms of their own rebound rate. Aaron Action Estrada, Mark Sears, Grant Nelson, we all know them for their offense, but all three of these guys, they do give you at least 4.2 rebounds per game. Sears is chipping in there 20.5 points, shooting 43.5% from three. Action Estrada gives you about 5.5 boards, 4.5 assists, like what they're able to bring to the table. And for Alabama, I mean, this has been really incredible. Each of their top 5 scorers do shoot at least 83% of the free throw line. Latrell Wrightsell has yet to miss a free throw this season, so that has been rather amazing to take a look at. But also with Alabama, they really do live and die by the three. I was pointing out the good perimeter defense of Florida, but for Alabama, they are 10th in the country in terms of percentage of shots that come from three-point range at 48%. They do also shoot about 34.8% from distance away from home, compared to about 39.8% from three-point range at home. So I think that there's a lot of issues there. I did set Florida as the slightest of slight favorites at home. I made them a 1-point favorite. First time these two teams met, by the way, it was 85-85 at the end of regulation. That total was about 173.5. Went over due to overtime. I don't see a redo here, but that said, with Florida at a 1.5 or less, I'm going to need to fade them. I do think that this is going to be very much a nip and tuck game, so at 1.5 or more, going to be taking a look at the points with Alabama. I do think that they're a little bit more of the complete team, and I do think that for Alabama, them doing a better job of taking care of the ball than Florida outside the top 120 with regards to turnovers on a per possession basis, going to be a little bit costly, so here at 1.5 or more, taking the points with Alabama, but the right up here, that is going to be on the total under semi-total at a 171. 647, 648 on the betting board. Kansas plays us to Kansas State, and Kansas State is an underdog of 10.5 to 11 points. Total on this game is 143.5. I do think that this is a good get-right spot for Kansas. I did make them the favorite of 11 points, so here I had a 10 to a 10.5. That would be my max I'm going to be willing to lay, as this actually did open up at a 10, and I personally did take the opener myself, so I am in at 10. I would say once you get to 11, you've gotten to a point of no return, but for Kansas, they now have Kevin McCullough back at the fold, and that's big because this team just frankly does not have a lot of depth. McCullough has been able to do a tremendous job supplying the team with north of 18 points. He's able to give you 6 boards, 4+ assists per game, and then obviously Hunter Dickinson down low is able to give you those 10.5 rebounds per game. That's big going up against a Kansas State team that is a top 75 team with regards to their rebound rate, and a Kansas State team that has been a top 60 team with regards to points allowed on a per possession basis. But for Kansas State, they very much do rely upon the octagon of doom for most things. The one thing that they don't is perimeter defense. They only allow opponents to shoot 30.1% from three-point range when they're away from home. That's actually a top 40 mark in all of college basketball. But for this Kansas State team. In terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, they are giving up right around about 4.5 points more per 100 possessions when they leave home. Where it really gets costly is on the offensive side of things, as you do have Arthur Kaluma give you 14 points, 7 boards. Cam Carter along with Ty Perry in the backcourt, they've been able to combine for about 30 points per contest, so neither of these guys are necessarily shooting it well from 3-point range. But for Kansas State, they're overall 226th in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, but registering 8.1 points fewer per 100 possessions when they're away from home. Meanwhile, Kansas sees a boost of about 12.5 points more per 100 possessions when they're at home. The defensive split's not quite as demonstrative, as they've been a top 40 team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis on both venues, but you do have DeJuan Harris, who does a nice job of being able to dish out the ball, 6.5 assists to a little bit under 2 turnovers per game. Kansas State, the last time these two teams played, they were able to get a triumph in overtime, and in regulation, neither team was able to break 65. I do think that you get a little bit of warmer offense here, but I do think that this is going to be, once again, much like we've seen with Kansas State, low-scoring slog, and because Kansas State is outside the top 310 in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis, it is going to cost them in this game. 1 to lay up to 10.5 with Kansas, and semi-total at a 139, so also taking a look at the under. 649, 650 on the betting board. Pittsburgh is going to be playing us with Florida State, and Florida State is a underdog of 8 points here total on this game. It is 148 to 148.5. With Florida State, I did set them as an underdog of 7 points, so going to be willing to take the points. Pittsburgh has been a top 55 team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and I like what they're getting down low. Frederico has been able to give you nearly 5 boards, a block and a half per contest. You're going to be able to have total domination down low. Florida State being well outside the top 200 with regards to rebound rate. Meanwhile, this Pittsburgh unit, even though they don't have that one guy that's going to give you like a double-figure amount of boards or anything like that, they're 42nd. Zach Austin has done a nice job, give you 4+ boards. He throws in there a block plus per contest. With Pittsburgh, they've also gotten really good production just across the board from Ishmael Leggett and Carlton Carrington. These two guys combined for about 25.5 points. They dole out 6.3 assists, about between the two of them, 10.5 rebounds per game. Neither of them necessarily shoots it amazing from 3, but that's why you've got Blake Hinson, who's been able to shoot 42% from 3-point range, 18.5 points per game for a Pittsburgh team that is in the top 30 nationally with regards to turnovers on a per possession basis, going against a Florida State team that they do rely upon those turnovers. They're a top 40 team with regards to turnovers forced on a per possession basis, with Jameer Watkins leading the way, nearly 2 steals, 15 points, 6 rebounds per game, but Florida State just doesn't have a ton from the outside. Watkins and Darren Green Jr. are truly the lone two guys that see significant minutes on the roster. They're shooting above 31.5% from 3-point range. Green has been able to shoot 37.5% from 3 with 11 points per game, and while Primo Spears has been able to give you 11 points per game, the inefficiency for him has been really rough as well, shooting only about 30% from 3-point range. Now, Florida State does quite a bit of a better job of guarding the perimeter away from home rather than at home. At home, they allow opponents to shoot north of 37% from 3. This drops all the way down to about 31.5% away from home, but I do think that with Pittsburgh being able to do a nice job, being able to protect the ball, with Florida State having all sorts of deficiencies with regards to being able to generate good, clean offense as well, I do think that it allows Pittsburgh to be able to get the job done in this ordeal, and I do think that Pittsburgh protects the ball against a Florida State team that has been doing a nice job of ball hawking all season long, but with this Pittsburgh team, do still have a little bit of trepidation with them as well against a Florida State team that I do think they're going to be able to get a little bit more out of Bob Miller moving forward, and this has been a Pittsburgh team that has not necessarily been a team that has been able to separate a lot recently as well. It is a Pittsburgh unit that has been a bit all over the place with regards to their offense, and you do have a Florida State team that, to their credit, they've now been able to get past the 76-point plateau in 3 of their last 4 games, so I do think that this is going to be a bogged-down game. Set my total at 147. I'm going to be willing to take a look at this total under, and at anything north of 7, we'll take the points with Florida State. 651, 652 on the betting board. Wake Forest is going to be playing us to Georgia Tech, and Georgia Tech is an underdog of 13.5 points. So on this game, it is 115.5 to 151. I did set Georgia Tech as an underdog of 13 points. Here at the 13.5, that is my buy point. Georgia Tech has been able to do one thing quite well, and that's guard the perimeter. In terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage, they're 58th in all of college basketball, going up against a Wake Forest team that is going to be able to win the battle on the glass. Wake Forest, a top 100 team in terms of rebound rate, with Efton Reed along with Austin Carr doing a nice job, combining for about 15 or so rebounds per game. Wake Forest has done a nice job guarding the perimeter themselves, 75th in the country in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage, with Hunter Salas being the best overall scorer in this game. He's able to supply 18.5 points, shoots in the high 30s from three-point range. Meanwhile, you've got a Georgia Tech unit that has been getting a lot of production out of Nathan George, who's now doling out about 4.5 assists per game, chipping in there about 9 points per contest, has seen a little bit of a fall off with his facilitation recently. 3 assists or fewer in 3 of the team's last 4 games. Prior to this, a little bit of a cold spell. He had given out 4+ assists in 8 of the previous 9 games, but still has been able to do a nice job impacting a lot of games. You've also got down low Bate and Dongo, who's able to give you about 8 boards, 12 points, shoots in the low 30s from three-point range for a Georgia Tech team that one of their biggest kryptonites is their outside shooting. They shoot just 32.5% from three-point range. Miles Kelly, while he does a nice job leading the team with 14 points per contest, he's shooting just 32% from three-point range, and for that matter, out of their top 4 scorers, only one of them does shoot above 32% from the outside. Meanwhile, for Wake Forest, it is a very top-heavy team. You've also got Cam Hildreth, Kevin Boopy Miller. They're combining for about 29.5 points per game, 5.5 assists. But, really outside of these guys I've listed off, you don't have anyone else really of impact that's giving you north of 5.5 points per contest. Damari Monsanto is a nice sharp shooter, but he just can't stay out there on the court. He's been dealing with injuries all season long. So Wake Forest currently dealing with some depth issues. Meanwhile, for Georgia Tech, it has been all over the place with regards to their offense, and that's illustrated by the fact that they had scored 80+ points in their last 2 games. In their previous 3, they had scored 65 points or fewer in every one of them, but they do go up against a Wake Forest unit that they've had their issues with regards to guarding as well. They have now given up 70+ points each out of their last 3 games after they had given up fewer than 60 in their previous 2 as well. It's been all over the place and wonky out here in the ACC. Take a look at Georgia Tech's overall production on defense. They're just 251st in all of college basketball in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. This is a Wake Forest unit that is more around 82nd in the country and is giving up about 12 points fewer per 100 possessions when they're at home rather than away from home. But I do think that for Georgia Tech, they're going to do just enough on offense. They're actually scoring more points per possession when they're away from home rather than when they are at home. And for Wake Forest, just that lack of depth and that lack of just being able to present different looks, I do think is going to cost them a little bit in this game against the Georgia Tech team that's done a nice job locking it down from three-point range. I did set my total at 151. Here at the 150.5. I'm looking at the overs. I do think that Georgia Tech going to be able to knock down a few shots and be able to grab a few boards against Wake Forest team that is relatively solid on that front, but neither of these teams are giant turnovers, so that is going to lead to a lot of clean possession. So looking at the over, and I'm going to be willing to take the points with Georgia Tech. 653, 654 on the betting board. San Diego State is the road face-off against UNLV. UNLV a 1.5 to a 2-point favorite. In your total on this game, it is 136.5 with UNLV. I did set them as a underdog of 3.5 points. So I'm going to be willing to lay with San Diego State. San Diego State just continues to be one of the better defenses out there in college basketball, and they just cut you off from three-point range. 8th in the country in terms of opponent's three-point shooting percentage, going up against a UNLV unit that it's just really hard to know what to make out of them. UNLV has actually been worse on defense at home rather than on the road. Overall, they're 60th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, but they allow opponents to shoot 31% from three-point range when they're away from home. At home, that balloons up to about 32.5% per distance. UNLV also just 150th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. They're only giving up about 3 points fewer per 100 possessions when they are at home. UNLV has actually been a little bit of a stronger offensive team, which if you watch this UNLV team, you would not know how that's the case, but they're about 112th in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, scoring 2.1 points fewer per 100 possessions at home rather than away from home. Tedrick Thomas has been amazing, 12 points, 6 assists, has come on as freshman, has been able to help out the Boone brothers, who are combining for about 13 or so rebounds per contest. But for San Diego State, Jaden Ledee, he's going to be the best player in the game. He's been able to give the team 20.5 points, 8.5 rebounds per game for a San Diego State team that also does not necessarily shoot it amazing from three-point range. They only shoot about 32% from the outside, but you've been able to get some relatively good production out of Micah Parrish, who's been able to give you about 9.5 points per contest with San Diego State. They should be able to do a nice job of being able to win the battle on the glass, because even with the Broom brothers back in the fold, and I do think that this is a little bit of a misleading stat with what we saw early on in the season, but UNLV still outside the top 200 in terms of the rebound rate. Meanwhile, San Diego State, they're checking in more around 60th with this regard. San Diego State has been able to play a really good defense here down the stretch. They have given up fewer than 70 points in each of their last 5 games, and the last time they gave up north of 70 points in regulation, because the game that they played against Nevada, where they gave up approximately 70, that went to overtime. You have to go all the way back to early January. They gave up the 79 spot against Colorado State, but past that, they've really been able to do a nice job of hunkering down. And to the credit of UNLV, it's been north of 5 games since they've given up north of 70 as well. So I do think that this is going to be a low-scoring slog. I said my total 133.5, diving under, but I just think that San Diego State wins from within. I'm willing to lay up to 3 with them. 655, 656 on the betting board. Boise State, they play us in Nevada. Nevada is a underdog of 5 to 5.5 points on this game, between 142.5 and 144. I did set my line at a 4. I'm going to be willing to take the points with Nevada. Nevada just does all the little things well. They're a top 35 team in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis. Nevada, a top 75 team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and they lock you down from 3-point range. Nevada's only allowing teams to shoot 31.4% from 3, 49th in all of college basketball for Boise State. Offense has really taken off for them recently, but the defense has taken a little bit of a setback. The one place where it hasn't, perimeter defense, they are 14th in the country with regards to opponents' 3-point shooting percentage, but they do have Tyson Dagenhart to be able to supply the team with 15 points, 5 boards. Absolutely love what he's able to do for this team, and Omar Stanley has been able to chip in there right around about 6 rebounds per game as well. As a result, Boise State has been 16th in all of college basketball in terms of their rebound rate, but Nevada, even though they don't have as good of a rebound rate, overall rebound rate, they're about 100th. They are a top 75 team in the country in terms of not allowing opponents to be able to get a second chance on a miss. You do have Jabuzo Egbo on the flip side for Boise State, averaging a double-figure amount of points, shooting 40+% from 3-point range, but Keenan Blackshear, Jared Lucas, love this backcourt tandem for Nevada. Nearly 33 points per contest. Blackshear is your do-it-all guy. Steal and a half, 5 boards, 5 assists. Doesn't pop it well from 3. Meanwhile, Lucas, he does shoot 40% from 3-point range, and Nevada just 9.9 turnovers per game, so that has been rather impressive. Meanwhile, you've got a Boise State team that just doesn't have a lot of depth, and with Cam Martin, a 6'9", just do-it-all sort of player, leading team in assists with about 2.7 assists per contest, I do think that Nevada going to do a nice job holding in this game. It's not a Nevada team that's going to really be generating a bunch of turnovers or anything like that. They just play good, solid, crisp, man-to-man defense with having Noah Davidson being able to give you about 7.5 rebounds per game. I do like this Nevada team in this spot. I set my line at 4. I'm going to be willing to take the points. And in terms of the total, I did set mine at a 140. Both of these teams well outside the top 200 with regards to total possessions per game. And this has been a Boise State unit that has been far more dominant with their defense when they've been at home rather than when they've been on the road. For Boise State, 72nd in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, giving up 7.9 points fewer per 100 possessions at home. So looking at the under, and I'm going to be willing to take the points with Nevada. Now we head to the Sun Belt Conference Tournament. These are neutral court games out there in Pensacola, Florida. 657, 658. It is Coastal Carolina playing against Louisiana Monroe. Monroe is a favorite of 2 points total on this game between 144.5 and 146. And with Monroe, I did set them as 4-point favorites. I'm going to be willing to take them in this rather pick'em game with Louisiana Monroe. It has been a case where they just have been able to ascend towards back half of the season, and Coastal Carolina has been stuck in the mud. And with Coastal Carolina, Janak Ojiako has been able to give you about 10 rebounds per game, and Coastal Carolina, not necessarily the world's worst team on the glass, but Louisiana Monroe has actually been better. They've got Nika, I can't pronounce the last name, but he's been able to give the team 10 points, 6 boards for a Louisiana Monroe team that's now 105th in all of college basketball in terms of rebound rate. Meanwhile, for this Coastal Carolina team, they're checking in more around 151st. Kevin Easley, he's easily been able to give you about 5 or so rebounds per contest, but with this Louisiana Monroe team being able to get a little bit of a breath of fresh air from Tariq LaCour, who's been a little bit up and down all season long, but now has been able to reach his full peak, 11 points, 3 assists, 2 steals, shooting 36% from 3. That's been big for a Monroe team that all throughout the season, they've been outside the top 280 with regards to points scored on a per possession basis. They go up against the Coastal Carolina team that just is not protecting the ball. 13.5 turnovers per game, shoots 66% at the free throw line, 32% from 3, with Jacob Myers being able to supply about 15 points per contest, and they've been looking a little bit more to John Sanders to facilitate the team. He and Myers combined for a little bit over 5 assists per game, but Coastal Carolina comes in really bad form. They've lost each of their last 4. They have scored 71 points or fewer in 3 of their last 4 games, and for Louisiana Monroe, they did lose 3 out of their last 4, but they did have to take on Troy twice in their last 5 games. It has been a team that has been able to ascend a little bit more with their offense, so they're coming in having scored fewer than 70 points each of their last 5 games, and even though Coastal Carolina has certainly been giving it up, I do think that the neutral court environment is going to bog down the scoring just a little bit, but I do think that Monroe going to be able to get the job done. I do like what they have down low and the way that they played down the stretch, so I did set my line at a 4. I'm going to be willing to lay with Monroe, and set my total 144 here at the 144 and after 145, diving in on the under. 659, 660 on the betting board from Pensacola. It's Texas State going up against Old Dominion. Old Dominion, an underdog 3.5 to 4 points. So on this game is 136.5. Said Old Dominion as a 5.5-point underdog. I'm going to be willing to lay it with Texas State. Texas State certainly has had their ups and downs all season long, and it's a unit that's well outside the top 250 in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, but Old Dominion outside the top 275 in terms of both rebound rate and points allowed on a per possession basis, and with Sean Alouette, their top scorer, left the program in late January, so now it's going to be up to Chauncey Jenkins to really engineer some offense. 16 points, shoots 32.5% from three-point range, and I do like what I've been seeing out of Tyrone Williams. He has had to step up into a much larger role, and ever since we have seen the departure of Alouette, he's been able to do so. He has scored at least 9 points in pretty much all but one out of these games in which he has been out of the fold, and he's been able to do a better job of being able to pop in from three-point range. Overall for the season, Tyrone Williams shooting about 31.5% from three-point range. Meanwhile, you do have a Old Dominion unit that they just don't have anything down low. Outside of Alouette, they only have Williams giving you north of 4.5 rebounds per game. For Old Dominion, they don't turn the ball over a ton with about 11 turnovers per game, but for Texas State, this bunch I do think is going to be able to win the battle on the glass. Top 175 team in terms of their rebound rate. You've been able to get 7.5 boards, 11.5 points per game out of Davion Sykes, who's been a little bit injured throughout the season, but he's good to go in this one. And you've also been able to get nice facilitation with Caden Gums being able to dole out 3.5 assists per contest around there. Jordan Mason and his 12.5 points per game, and the fact that Colton Benson is now shooting about 37% from three-point range. I do think the Texas State finds a way to be able to persevere and get it done. Did set my total at 138. Old Dominion has been just a nightmare all season long on defense. I think that is going to be continuing as Old Dominion. They enter having given up at least 80 points in 3 of their last 4 games, and to the credit of Texas State, they've gone past 68 points in each of their last 5 games. So looking at the over, and I'm going to be willing to lay with Texas State. 661, 662 on the card. Robert Morris is on the road facing off against Fort Wayne. These are true home games out in the Horizon League on Tuesday, with Fort Wayne being an 11.5 to a 12-point favorite. Total on this game between 147 and 147.5. Set my line at 11. At 11.5 to 12, I think we've gone a little bit too far. Now, Fort Wayne has been really good at being able to generate turnovers on their home floor. They're a top 40 team with regards to turnovers force on a per possession basis, and they're legitimately a top 75 team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis when they are at home. But I do feel like this is one a little bit too lofty. With Robert Morris, you've been able to get better three-point shooting towards the back half of the season. Overall for the year, shooting just 33.5% from distance, but here in the calendar year of 2024, shooting well above 35% from the outside, with the duo of Marquise Hastings, Josh Corbin being able to supply 28 points. You've got both of these guys shooting north of 37.5% from the outside, and you do have a team that's able to actually really shoot it from the free throw line as well. Of your top 7 scorers, all but one of them do shoot at least 73% at the free throw line. You've got an IPFW team that as well. They've been really good with regards to crossing their T's and dotting their I's. The 10.1 turnovers per game, with their tempo being in the top 75. That's one of the best turnover rates in all of college basketball. They do just shoot 69.5% of the free throw line, though. Of their top 5 scorers, 4 of them do shoot at least 75% of the charity stripe. That is of significance. And you've got a Fort Wayne team that they overall shoot about 36.5% from three-point range. You got 2 guys in Quentin Morton Robinson, Jalen Jackson. They combine for about 29.5 points per contest. Both of these guys are shooting north of 40% from three-point range for a Fort Wayne team that, in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, it's been pretty impressive what they've been able to do. They're a top 100 team with this regard, but they only average about 2.6 points more per 100 possessions at home rather than in a road/neutral venue. And Robert Morris well outside the top 225 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. But for Robert Morris, their offense takes no drop off away from home. They're only averaging 0.7 points fewer per 100 possessions away from home rather than at home. Now for Robert Morris, they do come in having rode a 6-game losing streak, but they've been close in a lot of these games. They have lost out of their last 3 games, 2 of them by 10 points or fewer. Now, when these 2 teams last played, that was actually a few nights ago. Fort Wayne got that win by a count of 83-65, but that was a game where Fort Wayne shot 12 of 26 from 3. Robert Morris just 11 of 34, and fully recognize that the outside shooting defense of Fort Wayne is significantly better than that of Robert Morris. Fort Wayne has been a top 35 team in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage at home all season long. Currently, they're checking in about 105th, so we've seen a little bit of fall off there, but still, they've been pretty solid. Meanwhile, it's a Robert Morris team that, in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage, they are clocking in 230th, but I do think that Robert Morris finds a way to be able to hold in there, with Fort Wayne being well outside the top 275 with regards to rebound rate, only having one guy in Eric Mulder, who gives you north of 5.5 rebounds per game. That allow Robert Morris to remain lively. I did set my total at a 151. I'm going to be willing to take a look at the over. Fort Wayne has been playing with their hair on fire all season long, so like the over and the points here with Robert Morris. 663, 664 on the betting board. It is Cleveland State playing us to IUPUI. Old UEPUI is a 16.5-point underdog with your total between 145 and 145.5. Set IUPUI as an underdog of 17 points. I'm going to be willing to lay it with IUPUI. They're outside the top 275 in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage, rebound rate, points scored, and points allowed on a per possession basis. They also turn the ball over 14.5 times per contest, so they're not doing that well. Outside Jalen Counter, you just don't have much with this team. And Counter's been solid. 4 boards, 3 assists, 14.5 points on 33.5% three-point shooting. You don't have a single guy on the roster shooting above 33% from three-point range, and Counter is that guy. We've got a Cleveland State team that has been having their issues on the glass. They're outside the top 225 with regards to rebound rate, but there's nobody outside Quincy Samuels for IUPUI that gives you north of 4.5 rebounds per game, so they'll be nice, crisp, and clean there for Cleveland State. They've done a nice job cutting off the three-point line, top 50 team in all of college basketball, and Cleveland State is a top 75 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, with Tristan Enaruna being very versatile and very productive. 3 assists, 6.5 boards, 20 points. Doesn't shoot it well from 3. Cleveland State has seen their three-point shooting numbers bogged down to about 33.5% from the outside, but they do a nice job protecting the ball. They return the ball for 10 times per contest. Tay Williams, Drew Lauder combined for about 24 points per contest. That has been instrumental for Cleveland State being able to maintain, and got an IUPUI team that they enter having lost 11 straight games. Now, they were able to get a cover last time they played against Cleveland State. That was a 75-66 slog in which Cleveland State only shot 22% from three-point range, but Cleveland State was able to win the turnover battle. IUPUI just happened to be a better shooting team on that day. I don't think that that's going to duplicate itself for IUPUI. Last time, they gave up fewer than 75 points in a game. You have to go all the way back to the month of January. Meanwhile, you've got a Cleveland State unit that has been bearing down with their defense. 73 points of fear surrender in 4 of their last 5 games. So, interesting spot here. I just don't think that IUPUI does their part with regards to the total. I set mine at a 143. Cleveland State outside the top 200 with regards to total possessions per game. So, going under. And with Cleveland State, we'll delay up to 16.5 with them. This is the last game on the normal Las Vegas betting board before we hit the extra game, 665, 666. It is Detroit. They're facing off against UW Milwaukee. Milwaukee is a 13 to a 13.5 point favorite. Total on this game between 152.5 and 153. Willing to take 13 here with Detroit. With Detroit, you've got Jaden Stone and Marcus Tankersley, who's done a really nice job of being able to combine for 37 points per contest. You get the two of these guys, 9.5 boards, 5 assists. Stone has been able to chip in there and seal 9 per contest. And for Detroit, much like IUPUI, bad metrics outside the top 3 in terms of both points scored and points allowed on a per possession basis. They are getting just absolutely romped with giving up threes. Detroit, in terms of opponent's three-point shooting percentage, they're in 54th in all of college basketball, but UW Milwaukee's well outside the top 3 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis as well. Milwaukee's going to win the battle in the glass. Detroit well outside the top 250 with regards to rebound rate, while Milwaukee's in the top 175 facing on Fields has been able to give you 5 rebounds per game, but let's call it what it is. This UW Milwaukee team, they completely run off of the energy of BJ Freeman. BJ turned it up. Freeman, 20.5 points, 6.5 boards, 4.5 assists, shoots 37% from 3, but also in the top 10 in all of college basketball with regards to turnovers per game, 3.8 turnovers per contest, and even though UW Milwaukee has been putting up some Herculean numbers on offense, they're still just 104th in all of college basketball in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. They are logging about 12.5 points more per 100 possessions at home rather than on the road, but this is also one of the most ghastly defenses that you're going to find in the country. 307th for UW Milwaukee in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, only giving up 1.7 points fewer per 100 possessions when they're at home. They're allowing it from 3-point range as well. UW Milwaukee, in terms of their 3-point shooting defense, they are allowing opponents to shoot 35.6% from the outside there, with Eduardo Del Cadilla being able to give you about 5 rebounds per game for Detroit, and having a few of the other ancillary pieces just giving you a little bit of something. I do think that Detroit, with Stone and Tankersley being able to really headline things, are going to be able to do just enough to hold them there against a UW Milwaukee team that has been just bleeding points all season long, and for Detroit, they themselves have just been absolutely awful on the defensive front as well, as they've given up at least 75 points in 3 of their last 4 games. So, circumstance where I did set my total more around a 156.5, looking at the over, and I'm willing to take 13 or more here with Detroit. Now we hit the extra games.
The normal betting board picks are complete, but there are some extra games today, so we go into the bonus.
This starts with 306-501, 306-502. UMass Lowell is on the road facing off against Maine. Maine hopes to not get Maine. They're underdogs of between 4.5 to 5 points. On game is 140.5. Did set my line at 4. I'm going to be willing to take the points with Maine. Now for Maine, they're going to lose the battle on the glass. UMass Lowell, a top 30 team in terms of their rebound rate. Meanwhile, Maine, they are well outside the top 225. But for Maine, this has been one of the best teams at being able to generate turnovers in a mid-major conference. As a matter of fact, they've got the nation's leader in turnovers/steals from a season ago, and Kellen Tynes with 13 points, 3.5 boards. This year he's only got 2.3 steals per contest. That was more like 3 last season, but doing a nice job ripping the ball away. Now, for Maine, they are not a good three-point shooting team. They're only shooting about 30% from the outside, going up against the UMass Lowell team that has been one of your better mid-major defenses in all of college basketball. And one of Lowell's specialties is cutting off the three-point line. In a road or neutral court environment, their allowing putters to shoot just 26.4% for three, and then they do combine that with Max Brooks down low, being able to supply multiple blocks. He's been able to give the team 6+ rebounds per game. They've been dealing with the Abdul Kareem Koulibaly injury all season long, but they've been able to overcome that, who was their top rebounder from a season ago. As Lowell, they are actually allowing about 1.5 points fewer per 100 possessions away from home rather than at home. They're a top 20 team in all of college basketball. They get points allowed on a per possession basis away from home, but having Peter Filipowski for this Maine team being able to give you about 13 points, 7+ rebounds per game, and Maine in their own right in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, checking in as a team that is about 53rd in all of college basketball, going up against a Lowell team that has been turning the ball over north of 12.5 times per contest. You've got Indy Akeem, who's able to give you 12 points, 5 boards, nearly 5 assists per contest, but this is a UMass Lowell team that they've got some deficiencies with regards to shooting from the outside. Yuri Covington has been able to do a relatively okay job of being able to supply some of the offense with about 10 points, shoots 37% from 3 points, but with 13 turnovers per game, I do think they're going to be very costly, and that'll allow Maine to be able to hold in what I think is going to be a bit of a low-scoring slog. I set my total 138, diving in on the under, and won't take anything north of 4.5 here, with Maine set them as a 4-point dog. 3-6-5-0-3, 3-6-5-0-4. Bryant plays us Albany. Albany is an underdog of 6 to 7 points on this game, 167.5. Did set my total at a 161. I'm looking at the under. Bryant is a top 5 team in all of college basketball with regards to total possessions per game, but Bryant has been actually a really good defense thus far this season. Bryant is clocking in about 55th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Strangely, they're actually allowing 0.3 of a point more per 100 possessions when they're at home rather than away from home in Albany. They are 221st in the country with regards to points allowed on a per possession basis, but they're only giving up about a half a point more per 100 possessions when they're away from home. These are two teams that do rank in the top 40 with regards to total possessions per game, but Albany a top 20 team in terms of cutting off the three-point line, going against the Bryant team that they have not been good on the glass. Bryant is outside the top 275 in terms of their rebound rate, with Earl Timberlake trying to do it all as he brings Sexy back, 14.5 points, 9 boards, 4 assists, doesn't necessarily pop it well from 3, and Bryant as a whole, they do shoot 67.5% the free throw line, 33% from 3, but for as up-tempo as they are, 11.5 turnovers per game is actually pretty impressive, as Sharif Gross-Bollock gives you 18.5 points per game. Rafael Pinzone has been able to shoot just 32% from 3, but he supplied the team with 11.5 points per game, and for Albany, they should be able to manhandle on the glass, but they've been dealing with an injury to their top rebounder in Jonathan Beagle. Jonathan Beagle has been out since February 1st, and he was logging for the team 9.5 rebounds per game. That leaves them without a single player that gives you north of 5 rebounds per game, as you've got a pair of guys in Amari Marshall, Sebastian Thomas, who have been able to supply 36.5 points per game. And Thomas, he turns the ball over about 3 times per contest. Really, both of these guys do. Albany 13.5 turnovers per game, going up against a Bryant team that, in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, they're not like some beastly team or anything like that. They're pretty average with that regard, but I do think they could come back to haunt them in this game, especially with Thomas shooting less than 30% from 3-point range. Albany as a whole, they're only shooting about 32.5% from the outside for this Albany team. It has been a case where the defense has just been giving it up. They have given up north of 80 points in 3 out of the last 5 games, but coming into this one, they have given up in regulation 67 or fewer in each of the last 2, and they're going against the Bryant unit that has been touch and go with their offense, 77 points or fewer in 3 out of their last 5 games. I do think that this is going to be a case where we are going to see things be a little bit more up-tempo and a little bit higher scoring, but with Albany not having that edge down low, I do think that allows Bryant to be able to manhandle this game, and I do think the Bryant comes to the forefront with their defense. Set my total 161, looking at the under, and I'm going to be willing to lay with Bryant, made them a 9-point favorite. 36.505, 36.506. New Hampshire is playing us to Vermont. Vermont a 7.5 to an 8-point favorite, with your total between 139.5 and 140. And with Vermont, I did set them as a favorite of 6 points. I'm going to be willing to take the points with a New Hampshire unit that is in the top 30 nationally with regards to opponent's 3-point shooting percentage, and they might have the best player out there on the floor, Clarence Daniels, who's been able to stockpile 9+ rebounds and 19.5 points per game. You've got Ahmad Robinson, who does a nice job doling it out, 4.5 assists, does turn the ball for 3.5 times per game, but staring at a Vermont team that they really don't generate a lot of turnovers, but Vermont has been one of the best teams with regards to their defensive efficiency in conference play, as they've done a nice job of being able to just take away the 3-point arc, and just really, they don't allow you to be able to get a lot of second chances. They don't really have anyone that gives you like north of 7 or so rebounds per game or anything like that. Shamir Bogues has been a little bit of a do-it-all player. He gives you about 5.5 boards, 10 plus points, throws in there a seal or two per contest, but this Vermont team is just as tough as a $2 steak. They're outside the top 320 with regards to total possessions per game, and Vermont a top 100 team with regards to opponent's 3-point shooting percentage, but I do think that this New Hampshire team is going to be able to hold in there. Jackson Baker, I think, is going to be able to help win that battle down low. 6.5 boards, and for this New Hampshire team, each of your top 3 scores do generate at least a steal per game. Vermont, they've been very good with their ball control. Top 75 team in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis with TJ Long chipping in there about 12 points, shoots 37.5% from 3-point range. You've got Matt Verrato, who's got size at 6'8". He shoots 35% from 3 at 9 points per game, but with Vermont not truly having a ton down low, I do think that allow New Hampshire to be able to hold in this game. It is a Vermont bunch that's given up 62 points or fewer for their last 5 games, and last time these two teams squared off, New Hampshire lost that game 70-54 on a night where they shot just 4 of 21 from 3-point range. I do think that both of these teams are going to be a little bit warmer on that front, but New Hampshire has shown that they're not afraid to play defense-oriented slugs, and I do think that they're going to be able to hold in this game. Semi-total 138. I'm looking at the under, and with Vermont, made them just a 6-point favorite, so going to be willing to take 7 plus here with New Hampshire. 306.507, 306.508. UMBC plays those to Binghamton. Binghamton is an underdog of 2.5 to 3-point totals between 152 and 152.5 with Binghamton. I did set them as an underdog of 2.5 points. I'm going to be willing to take the 3 with UMBC. This bunch is playing at warp speed, top 40 team with regards to total possessions per game, but for UMBC, they've been dealing with quite a few ailments. You've had the full Brandon Johnson for nearly half the season, along Kadarius Smith, who, he's just returned back to the fold, was able to see 22 minutes against NJIT, but then was out during the weekend as well, and these two guys have combined for about 23.5 points per contest, so that means that Deion Brown and Marcus Banks Jr., a pair of guys that combine for about 35.5 points per contest and both shoot approximately 35% from 3. They have to do it all for a UMBC team that, in terms of their offense, they're in the top 200 with regards to points scored on a per possession basis. Whereas the UMBC team goes wrong, they are well outside the top 225 with regards to points allowed on a per possession basis, despite the fact that their perimeter defense is actually quite good. They do allow opponents to shoot 33.6% from 3-point range at home. That compares to 28.8% away from home, so they're actually outside their forte zone, but they go up against a Binghamton team that they only shoot about 30% from the outside. But Binghamton, a top 125 team in the country with regards to rebound rate. UMBC well outside the top 250 with that regard, as you've got the versatility of Samir Torrance. Comes in from Syracuse, and he does it all. He's able to give you nearly 6 boards, 8.5 points, 7.5 assists. One thing he doesn't do is necessarily give you a bunch of points, but now shooting about 35% from 3-point range. Timu Chenry, he's been your main scorer, 15 points, 5 rebounds per contest. Also throws in there about a block and a half per contest as well. It's been a Binghamton team that has been outside the top 125 with regards to points allowed on a per possession basis, and for Binghamton, it can come and go with regards to their perimeter defense, but I do think that they're going to be able to hold up in this ordeal. It's a Binghamton team that is actually allowing opponents to shoot a lower clip from 3-point range away from home rather than at home. Their opponent's 3-point shooting percentage away from home is 34.8%, and with the UMBC a little bit banged up, I do think that that allows Binghamton to hold in there in a game that I do think is going to come down to late game fouling, be rather tight. This is a total between 152 and 153. Personally, I'd rather have the 152 over rather than the 153 under, as you've seen this Binghamton team now get to at least 76 points for their last 5 games, and the last time these two teams played, it was 89-78. So looking at the over on 152, and I'm going to be willing to take the points with Binghamton. 306-509, 306-510. This is the A-Sun tournament between Jacksonville and Eastern Kentucky. Starting to see openers pop up as this Eastern Kentucky team finds themselves as an 8.5 point favorite. Total on this game is 146. Now this is pretty much a back-to-back for Jacksonville, and Jacksonville has really bogged down their tempo in recent games with Robert Workman being back to the fold. He's been able to give the team 7.5 rebounds per game. My fear with Jacksonville, though, is that perimeter defense. At home, they allow opponents to shoot less than 30% from 3, north of 37% from 3 going into yesterday away from home, and this is an Eastern Kentucky team that bombs it from 3-point range. As a result, I did set Eastern Kentucky as a 10-point favorite, and I did set my total at 150. I'm looking at the over. Isaiah Cozart is going to be the best little post player in this game, leads the country with darn near 4 blocks per contest. He's able to give you 14 plus points, gives you nearly 10 rebounds per game. That's just a tough ass for a Jacksonville team that got to 92 yesterday, so you have to wonder how much you're going to have left in the tank after they went 13 of 21 from 3-point range. Kennesaw State was just catching a falling knife yesterday. You had Robert McCray be able to go off for 31 points, and overall for the season, he's logging about 18 points from 3-point range. He's been shooting about 32% at the very least. He was going into yesterday. That went up with yesterday's performance, but that's it for Eastern Kentucky, even though this has been a team that has been very rough with their perimeter defense. Eastern Kentucky, well outside the top 300 with regards to opponent's 3-point shooting percentage. I do think that with Jacksonville, you've got question marks with what you're going to be able to get out of them on offense. They're well outside the top 225 with regards to points scored on a per possession basis. Josiah Boom Boom Powell, he's been able to give you about 10 points per contest, but this is also a Jacksonville team that, again, they just are not the same team away from home, and even though they've been slowing things down, they're about 265th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, giving up darn near 20 points more per 100 possessions away from home rather than at home, going up against an Eastern Kentucky team that their game against Lipscomb to wrap up the regular season, first time in nearly 2.5 months in which they were held below 75 points. I think they get well past 75 in this one. Set my line at 10, so I'm going to be willing to lay with Eastern Kentucky and made my total 150. So also looking at the over 306.511, 306.512. Stetson is going to be playing out Queens NC. Queens NC is an underdog of 4.5 points. Total is 160.5. Did set my total 155. I'm going to be looking at the under. Queens NC with actually a really good defensive performance a few nights ago, and it was the first time in 4 games that they had given up fewer than 75 points, and the last time these two teams played, it was 83-85. That was on a night where Queens NC shot 44% from 3-point, and I just don't think that Lightning is going to be striking twice for Queens going into yesterday. They were shooting as collective about 34% from 3-point, and I do like their nice trio out there in the backcourt, as you've got Dayton Albury along with AJ McKee, who have been able to supply the team with about 36 points, north of 6 assists, 3 steals per contest, with Albury shooting 35% from 3, and then BJ McLaurin, he chips in there 11.5 points, nearly 6 rebounds per contest, but Stetson is going to be able to win that battle down low with Obeng Sterse, who's been able to give you about 7 rebounds per game, while Stetson is certainly not a great rebounding team. They're well outside the top 200 with regards to rebound rate. You've got a Queens NC team that's just 281st in all of college basketball with this regard, and it is a Queens team that they very much do feed off of their home crowd. They've been averaging about 10.5 points fewer per 100 possessions in a road/shooting court environment rather than at home, and for the Stetson unit, they have been a ghastly defense all season long in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, 320th in all of college basketball. Not like this Queens team has been any better going into yesterday, 332nd in the country, giving up nearly 9 points more per 100 possessions, and with how quickly Queens play, you do have to wonder about the back-to-back aspect and how much that's going to be taking out of them. It is a Queens team that they do a good job of being able to take care of the ball, to their credit, only turn the ball about 11.5 times per contest, but now they have to go up against Jalen Blackman. He's logging 21 points, shooting nearly 40% from 3-point. And for Queens, credit where credit is due. The one thing that can keep them lively in this game against a Stetson team that they are one of the top teams with regards to percentage of shots that come from 3-point is that Queens isn't the world's worst perimeter defense. I'm not saying it's amazing, but they entered yesterday allowing opponents to shoot about 34.2% from 3, but that does balloon up to about 35.5% in a roadside-shooting court environment, and now you have to go up against Alec Oglesby, who shoots 40% from 3. He's logging double figures, and Stephon Swenson, 6 assists to 2.5 turnovers per game for a Stetson team that they only turn the ball over about 10.5 times per contest, and Stetson is well outside the top 300 with regards to total possessions per game. And to the credit of Stetson, they've been a little bit better on defense recently, giving up 73 points of fear in 3 of their last 5 games. So I did set my total 155. Looking at the under, made Stetson a 7-point favorite, so I'm also going to be willing to lay the number 306.513, 306.514. North Alabama hits the road to face off against Lipscomb. Lipscomb is a 7 to 7.5 point favorite. Totals between 158.5 and 159. Did set my total 156.5. I'm going to be willing to dive under. Now for Lipscomb and North Alabama, both of these teams outside the top 225 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. But I do think that Lipscomb, after they lost to North Alabama the first time around by kind of 75 to 70, they're going to be able to exact some revenge. But I think that we went a little bit too far first time these two teams played. They went a combined 10 of 33 from 3-point, and I do think that they're going to get a little bit warmer. Lipscomb for the season shooting north of 36% from 3-point. North Alabama's collective, they've been shooting about 35.5% from 3, and with North Alabama, you've got a pair of guys in KJ Johnson, Lunchakari Lane, that have been able to combine for about 29 points, 6 assists, and they don't turn the ball over a lot. North Alabama, a top 50 team in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis. Lipscomb, not a team that's looking to generate a lot of turnovers, as they themselves only turn the ball over about 10 times per contest. But for Lipscomb, their top 6 scorers, all but one of them shoot at least 35.7% from 3-point, and each of their top 3 have been able to shoot north of 39% from 3-point. Now, what has been ailing them a little bit is the injury to Darren Boyd. We have not seen him since February 10th. They're going to try to get him back out there on the floor, but even if he plays, might not be 100%. So that means that Will Pruitt, AJ McGinnis, they're going to have to be your main 2 guys. Pruitt has been able to give you 6 boards per contest, only guy on Lipscomb's team that gives you north of 5 rebounds per game. He's been able to shoot about 43.5% from 3-point range. McGinnis, he's been able to give you about 13 points per contest, but really, other than the 4.5 assists that you get out of Joe Anderson, you don't have a lot of facilitation with this Lipscomb team as well. They're a little bit more of an isolation team, and Lipscomb and North Alabama, both of these teams are certainly up-tempo teams. They're both in the top 125 with regards to total possessions per game, and both have been a complete nightmare on defense, but I do think that North Alabama going to be able to hold in there because they also have the top top rebounder in this game. They've been able to have right around 7 to 7.5 rebounds per game out of Damian Force, who's been able to give 10 points per contest. Really doesn't have a lot of versatility, and whereas with the Alabama team, they are still 289th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. But I do think that with this Lipscomb team, just having to deal with that injury to Darren Boyd, it's been really taking a lot out of them in terms of their offense last time these two teams played. It was a little bit of a, shall we say, nip and tuck game, and for North Alabama, they themselves have scored now 72 points or fewer in 2 out of their last 3 games and 75 or fewer in 3 of their last 5. So they've been bogged down just a little bit. Semi-total 156.5. I'm going to be taking a look at the under, and with North Alabama, going to be willing to take 7 plus here with them. 3-6-5-15, 3-6-5-16. Also, P is going to be playing us in North Florida. North Florida is an underdog of 3.5 to 4 points. Totals between 146.5 and 147. Set North Florida is a 2.5 point dog. I'm going to be willing to take those points. It is an awesome P team that all of a sudden has just been playing at warp speed. They were one of the slowest teams in all of college basketball going into February, but ever since the month of February has come about, this awesome P team has gotten to at least 75 points in every one of their games. It has been a complete and utter epiphany for them, and I've had to shade up my totals as a result on this team's games. I did set my total at 148.5. I'm looking at the over. You've got a North Florida team that's outside the top 275 with regards to points allowed on a per possession basis, but they've got a nice score that is going to be able to keep them tight in this game. Chaz Lanier, 19.5 points per contest. He shoots 44% from three-point now. Austin P has actually been able to do a relatively solid job of being able to guard the three-point line. Austin P, with regards to opponent's three-point shooting percentage, they're checking in 135th in all of college basketball. Meanwhile, North Florida, well, they're not checking in that well. North Florida has allowed opponents to shoot 35.6% from three-pointers, including 38.5% in a roadside shooting guard venue, so there should be open shots to be had. And the good news for Austin P is that their top scorer, DeMarcus Sharp, who missed darn near a month due to injury, he's back in the fold, and he's been leading the team in darn near everything. He's not just their top scorer with being able to supply the team with about 16.5 points per contest, but he also chips in there 6.5 boards, 4.5 assists, 2 steals per contest, and after he led all of college basketball in three-point shooting percentage last season, shot just 6.7% thus far this season, but outside of him, each of your next top 5 scorers that have all made at least 1 3, they're shooting at least 35.5% from distance. It's Austin P. They shoot 37% from 3, and in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis, they're a top 30 team in all of college basketball, but Austin P just really doesn't have anything down low. Even something like Jake Vanderheiden for this North Florida team being able to give you 4 boards, that's big. As Austin P, with regards to the rebound rate, they are well outside the top 225 with this regard. Meanwhile, you've got a bunch I do think is going to be able to do an okay job of holding up on the glass in North Florida, they themselves, in terms of their rebound rate, they're checking in just 318th, but I do think that they're going to be able to exploit an Austin P team that is well outside the top 240 with regards to points allowed on a per possession basis. Their interior defense has been one of the weakest in all of college basketball, and being able to have someone like a Dorian James that gives you 5.5 boards, 10 points per game, I do think that keeps North Florida very lively in this game, as it's been a North Florida team that they've had a few hiccups with regards to their offense, but still, they've been able to get to at least 75 points, and now 5 out of their last 7 games coming in, and really all but 2 of their games since the beginning of the month of February. So did set my total 148.5. Looking at the over end, we'll take 3 plus here with North Florida. 36-5-17, 36-5-18. True home court games for these final 2 as Army plays us to Holy Cross. Holy Cross, a 4 to 4.5 point underdog. Totals between 130 and 131. I set my total at 126. I like this total under. Holy Cross has been putrid on defense. They're well outside the top 275 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and they are outside the top 340 in terms of opponent's three-point shooting percentage, but Army's outside the top 275 in terms of their three-point shooting percentage, and Army also shoots less than 60% at the free throw line. So I do think that this is going to be a little bit more nip and tuck than people think, and Army has been a top 100 team in college basketball in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Themselves are clearly a defense-oriented team with having a pair of guys in Ryan Curry along with Josh Govins, who combine for 22 points per contest. Between the two of them, they're shooting about 34% from three-point range, but also with pretty much the entirety of the Patriot League Saints Lehigh. All these teams are playing at a super-duper slow pace, and for Army, in terms of total possessions per game, they are really bogging things down. They are clocking in right around about 356 out of 362 D1 teams. They've been getting slower and slower as the season goes along, and for Army, they are going to be able to win the battle down low, but I like what Caleb Kenny has been able to provide for Holy Cross as well. He's been able to get the team right around about 6 rebounds per game. They've needed it because they're about 309th in all of college basketball with regards to the rebound rate. Army should be able to win that battle. They're about 194th with this regard, and it's a big reason why I'm going to be one to lay with Army, even though you do have a Holy Cross team that does have probably the most versatile player out there on the floor. Joe Octave, 14 points, 6 boards, just doesn't shoot it well from 3. Meanwhile, Bo Montgomery, Will Batchelor, Joe Nugent, They combined shoot about 38.5% from distance. Between these three, you've been able to get about 25 to 26 points per contest, but not a lot of facilitation. It's a Holy Cross team that's pretty rudderless, and they're outside the top 250 with regards to points scored on a per possession basis. Meanwhile, you've got an Army team that has just been really, really good in terms of their defense all season long, and the last time these two teams played, Holy Cross lost that game on their home floor 59 to 53 on a night where Holy Cross was only able to shoot 16% from three-point range. I think you're in for another low-scoring slog. Set my line at 6. I'm going to be willing to lay with Army, and set my total 126, looking at the under as well. And we're wrap things up with 306-519, 306-520. Navy plays host to Loyola, Maryland. Loyola, Maryland, a 7-7.5 point underdog. Total this game is 132.5. Did set my total at a 132.5. We're going to be waiting for a little bit of movement there. This is a total that in some places was as low as a 131 to a 131.5 to start. If we get back there, going to be looking at the over. It is a Navy team that has fallen outside the top 150 with regards to points allowed on a per possession basis, and they do give it up from three-point range. At home, they're allowing opponents to shoot 33.7% from three-point range, and that is really what Loyola, Maryland is going to need to stay lively. I did set my line at a 6.5. I'm going to be willing to take the points down. I do think the Navy is going to do a nice job turning defense into offense. Navy is a top 10 team in the country with regards to turnovers force on a per possession basis at home, and Loyola, Maryland, they are turning the ball over 13.5 times per contest. They are outside the top 300 with regards to turnovers on a per possession basis on offense, but they've got D'Angelo Steins along Deion Perry combined for 26.5 points per contest between the two of them. They do shoot about 35.5% from three-point range, and down low, you've had Milo Ilic along with Alonzo Farre, who have been able to combine for about 10.5 rebounds per game. That's going to be impactful against a Navy team that they've got one really good rebounder in Donovan Draper. He's been able to give you 9.5 points, 9 boards, 2 steals per contest. Outside that, you don't have a single guy, though, that is able to give you north of 5 boards per contest, and with Loyola, Maryland having Golden DK being able to trip in there about 7 rebounds per game, Loyola, Maryland should be able to do a nice job down low. They're about 148th in all of college basketball in terms of their rebound rate. Navy, they're checking in. We're on 250th, and Navy, they're only shooting 30.5% from three-point range. They go up against the Loyola, Maryland team that certainly has been giving it up all season long from three-point range. 295th in the country with regards to opponents' three-point shooting percentage, but that goes down to 34.6% away from home. It's more like 37.5% when they're at home. Austin Mangini has been able to give this Navy team 16.5 points per contest, but he's the lone guy giving north of 9.5 points per game. I do think the Loyola, Maryland finds a way to be able to hold in there. This Navy team has been leaking quite a bit of oil with regards to their defense the last few weeks. Meanwhile, the offense has gotten to at least 69 points in each of their last 4 games, and this is a Loyola team that they themselves have given up at least 68 points in each of their last 5. So semi-total 132.5 at a 132 or less. Look it over, and we'll take 7+ here of Loyola, Maryland, and that wraps things up for the Tuesday edition of Coast to Coast Hoops, now part of the VSiN family of podcasts. A big thanks to Curtis Rogers of 710 Seattle Sports for joining me in the last segment. If you do like what you're hearing from this fine podcast, Coast to Coast Hoops, you're able to subscribe wherever your podcast, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you do have one of 2 ways to fire those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at JNN_D1. Keep in mind, letters DM, maybe it does not matter size per usual. Please do send these into the timeline, and the other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. From there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to on this podcast. I have a 5-star review coming at you guys every single day throughout the college basketball season. That means I'm back with you once again tomorrow. Thank you so much for tuning in.